Getting Tenny clean took the better part of an hour, but convincing Zheng to get in the bath took years off my life. Tenny was smeared head to toe with her own sticky black amniotic fluid, like a science fiction alien, and the rainwater had done little to wash the worst of it from beneath her wings or out of her fur, but by the time we all tramped back indoors, damp and cold and dripping, we weren't much better off. Rain, Lozzie, Twill, and I were all dirty and caked with dried sweat from our day in the woods. Preem's maid uniform was soaked through after her trip up the tree. Lozzie and I had both hugged Tenny, gotten her black goo all over our clothes, and Lozzie had been kneeling in the grass, stained the knees of her jeans with mud. Only Evelyn and Kimberly had avoided both dirt and rain. Kimberly was busy scurrying back and forth with towels, trying to limit the collateral damage of even more mess as we got ourselves inside. Zheng was just plain filthy. By the time we got the back door shut, sealing us in the warm cocoon of number 12, Barnslow Drive, I was sagging with exhaustion. All was confusion, too many things happening at once. Lozzie and Rain focused on leading Tenny through the house, trying to coax her upstairs and into the bathtub before she smeared every interesting object with black goo on the way there. She dripped diluted black rainwater all over the floorboards. Kimberly hurried ahead trying to put towels down, Lozzie attempted to dry her feet, and Rain held another towel under her wings to catch the worst of the runoff. Twill got into a brief, pointless argument with Evelyn, something I had trouble following as I stood there in the utility room, my legs weak, my stomach still tender, a headache in the back of my skull. I rubbed my sore eyes with the back of my hand, and managed to get more of Tenny's black goo on my forehead. Then go home. Evelyn snapped at her. No, I mean, like, I'm fine with borrowing, said Twill. I just don't, it's your like, I'm not comfortable with like, your dash. Shit or get off the pot. Evelyn turned away from her, and that was that. Twill rolled her eyes and stomped off into the house after the others, still tracking mud from her Wellington boots. Evie, I tried, but she was already off again, at Zheng. Not one step further. Don't you dare. Evelyn waved the head of her walking stick at the hulking demon host. Zheng had been last in, standing just inside the back door now, dripping water from her sodden clothes all over the doormat, a small puddle forming around her feet. You smell like a pigsty and you're covered in blood. Is that even your own? It'll be a minor miracle if you're not crawling with lice. Wizard? Zheng rumbled, low and dangerous. Evie dash, I hissed. Heather, you're exhausted. Shut up for once and let somebody else handle things, Evelyn said, without missing a beat. If I'd been more energetic I would have laughed. She glared up at Zheng. You are not walking through this house like that. You strip off right here and you dump those clothes. Evelyn gestured at the washing machine, already stuffed with Lozzie's black-smeared poncho, soon to be joined by my hoodie and jeans. Preem stood next to it, hands clasped before her, soaked maid uniform hanging off her ample frame, clinging to her curves. You too, Evelyn said to her. I have no idea if you can catch cold, but don't risk it. Get all that off, now. Preem obeyed without a word. She set to unlacing the back of her uniform, dropping her tights, and stepping out of her long skirt. I stared for a moment and felt my cheeks burning, then turned my head to give her some privacy. I go where I desire, wizard, Zheng rumbled. Not in my house you don't, Evelyn said. Heather insists you're a thinking, feeling being. Well then, I'm treating you like one. Animals track dirt, guests and family take their shoes off at the door. Evelyn glanced her up and down. On second thought, those clothes are not remotely salvageable. We'll burn them. Zheng let out a low rumble. Zheng, please, I said, shielding my libido from Preem's rapid disrobing with a hand next to my eyes. You stole those clothes anyway, it's not as if they have any sentimental value. A squeal of alarm echoed from the front room, accompanied by panicked voices, Rain going, whoa, 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 like she was trying to soothe a horse. The squeal trailed off into a long, loud, PPPPPFFFFTTTTT, suspiciously similar to a child sticking their tongue out and blowing a raspberry. Evelyn whirled on the sound. What was that? She yelled. Tenny met your spiders. Lozzie called back. She's fine. Ha! Zheng barked. Fresh from the womb and the puppy. Already knows how to taunt. Good. Yes, surely an important life skill, Evelyn said. She waved a dismissive hand at Zheng without bothering to look at her again, already marching out of the utility room. I don't have time for you, get on with it. Who tracked all this mud in here? Are these Twill's boot prints? Twill. Evelyn left, shouting. Zheng stared at her back. Preem, I cleared my throat. Maybe you should find some spare clothes. Clothes, Preem intoned, and followed Evelyn, deftly avoiding the muddy patches with her bare feet. Shaman, Zheng said. I glanced up at her filthy, matted hair, at the stains of blood and grease and woodland mud all over her jumper and coat, at her fingernails, far too long, dirt packed beneath them. Up close and indoors I could smell her, like a wild animal, heavy with bodily odor and soil and old meat. When's the last time you brushed your teeth? I asked. She just raised an eyebrow. Oh no. Zheng. No. You have to have a bath, at least. Is that your command, shaman? No, it's a heartfelt suggestion, because I'd like to be able to give you a hug without worrying about stains. And I know what you're going to say, something about how you don't suffer tooth decay or gum disease because the bacteria can't beat you in a fistfight, but the rest of us can still smell that. You're a walking disease risk right now, and neither Lozzie or I are immune to infections. Please. Zheng grinned, a flash of razor-sharp teeth. Join me in the bath, shaman. I froze. Couldn't get a word out. A joke, she rumbled, then shrugged off her coat and started to pull her soaking jumper off over her head. It got stuck on her shoulders, at which she gave up and just started ripping the jumper open down the middle. I stared and swallowed and scurried out before I was left alone in a small room with a massive libidinal hazard. Twill stomped about, spooked by Tenny, goaded by an occasional comment from Zheng, fuming silently at Evelyn. Lozzie shed dirty clothes with no care for where they fell, and at one point she sat down in the hallway next to Zheng and fell asleep for 5 minutes, impossible to wake until she shot up again like a freshly wound clock. Poor Kimberly scurried about underfoot, trying to avoid Zheng's attention, looking lost and trapped. In the end, getting Tenny into the bath wasn't too difficult. She took to the water with obvious pleasure and curiosity, making little fluttering, purring noises in her chest as Lozzie had soaked up her fur, squinting her eyes shut and shaking herself as Rain had rinsed her off with the shower head. Lozzie petted her and talked nonsense to keep her calm, but it was probably unnecessary. We quickly discovered more quirks of her unique biology. Her wings thick and leathery to the touch separated into 4 distinct pieces, 2 wider ones which covered her sides and front when at rest, and 2 slimmer ones which hung down her back. The tentacles exited the cloak through either the gaps between the wings just below her shoulders, or by running all the way down to her feet, or out the front. In the bath, with her wings flopped over the sides of the tub, we could see her back, but her shoulders were almost impossible to reach, too far under the wings to see without getting behind and beneath her, blocked by the mass of tentacles which extended between the gaps between the wing segments. Her tentacles kept roaming the bathroom, knocking over shampoo bottles, inspecting the light fixtures, gripping the bar of soap too hard so it shot across the floor. One of them tried to drink the bath water and spat it back out. Another chewed softly on Lozzie's shoulder. A third kept fiddling with the taps. She shivered and made little irritated fluttery sounds when anybody touched the antennae on her head, so we quickly decided not to do that. At one point everybody except Tenny and Lozzie came tumbling out of the bathroom. Preem was last out, and closed the door behind them. Potty training, Rain explained with a laugh. She knew exactly what she was doing, Evelyn said. That was not training. Could warned us, said Twill. At least we've established that she excretes, Evelyn sighed. And that she's not carrying a clutch of pre-fertilized eggs, or something equally disastrous. Outdoors, the sun went down behind the rain clouds, true dusk swallowed by the storm into a haze of fading light. Eventually I found myself alone in the upstairs hallway. Zheng had stomped off, probably to eat everything in the fridge. The others were still washing Tenny, soft voices murmuring in the bathroom. I shivered inside my t-shirt, bruises throbbing in my sides, my damp hoodie in my hands, socks missing. Couldn't recall removing them. I wanted nothing more than to strip off the rest of my clothes, ignore the dried sweat on my skin, and curl up in bed. Evelyn was right, I'd done more than enough leading for one day. Others could deal with the rest. Heath. Tenny's voice echoed from the bathroom, fluttery and frilled, my name as if spoken by a throat made of fanned paper. Heather. I looked up. Rain's head had appeared around the bathroom doorway. Splashing noises came from behind her, followed by a weird warbling complaint. Was that Tenny? I asked. Yeah. She's all right, just being fussy. Rain stepped out and over to me. Gently, she took the hoodie from my hands and peered into my eyes. How you holding up? I shrugged. Kind of numb. Not surprised. Rain brushed my hair back over my ear and cupped the side of my neck. She kissed my forehead. It's been a long day. You can totally go lie down if you want, you know. Say hi to Tenny, tell her you're going to rest, I think she'll understand. I stared back into Rain's eyes, need surfacing through the numbness. I wanted to hug her, but I held back, a knot of unresolved tension twisting deep in my chest. If I'd been less exhausted, I would have let it go, been more logical, put this moment off until tomorrow or the day after, but by then Rain would have me back in bed and feeling normal again, and perhaps she'd pretend that certain things today never happened. You've been floating around back and forth, I have noticed, she was saying. There is such a thing as pushing yourself too far, especially after, she trailed off, reading the look in my eyes. Heather. Rain, we need to talk. Rain froze. I was treated to a look I'd never seen from her before, a moment of genuine suppressed panic beneath all her confidence, too powerful to suppress with a grin, too sudden to hide with a glib joke, too real to push away with her fingers in my hair. Guilt clutched at my heart. No, not like that. About Zheng, I mean, I said, and it all came out in a rush. I dropped my voice. But yes, also about you and I don't understand your behavior earlier today. I squeezed my eyes shut. God, why am I asking you this now? 'Cause you're dying for that threesome, Rain said with a laugh, and there it was, the glib joke rushing back. I glared at her. Capital G, Rain pulled a theatrical wince. 1 minute you're pushing me at her and you don't seem to care, the next you're marking your territory right in front of her, laying claim to me, and then you're making threesome jokes. I hissed, fuming. Rain, I don't know what exactly I want, but I don't know what you want either because you're confusing me, and that's worse. The theatrical wince held for a moment longer, and then Rain's expression crumbled into genuine contrition. She let out a big sigh and ran a hand through her hair. I've done screwed up, haven't I? Maybe. I don't know. How am I supposed to know if you won't tell me? No, I've screwed up, Rain said. Because I've made you feel insecure. Which means I've made a stupid mistake. She glanced behind her, at the open bathroom door and the increasingly loud warbling, fluttering sounds. Twill was saying something, drowned out by the noise, and I heard Lozzie too. You want to talk right now? Rain said. We can leave the others for a bit, go dash. Rain, do you love me? Yes, she said, no hesitation. Then everything else can wait, I'm too tired. I love you too. I fell against her with a hug. Behind us, the warbled complaint finally rose into an angry hiss. A long one. Twill's voice floated out of the bathroom. Okay, shit, she doesn't like it, fine. I told you. Lozzie's voice joined in. Hey, I'm just following orders, said Twill. Plus I think we're needed in there, I murmured into Rain's shoulder. Yeah. Try again, Evelyn's voice joined too, dry and disinterested. We rejoined the others to quite a scene. Twill had her sleeves rolled up past her elbows, dirty water splashed down her front, and a scowl on her face. Evelyn looked like she was trying to hide behind Preem without seeming to hide behind Preem. Kimberly had one hand on her mouth, like she wanted to be sick. Lozzie was half in the bathtub with Tenny, giving her a hug, getting herself covered in black-tinted water and soap suds, her braid half undone and hair everywhere. Tenny was still hissing, her feathery antennae twitching back and forth. No, I said with a sigh. Don't try again, whatever that was. She didn't like it. Lozzie repeated. Like what? I asked. What are you all doing to her? Evelyn shut her mouth and shook her head, rolling her eyes. Twill glanced to her for help or permission, then shrugged. I was trying to get my hand up to her shoulders, Twill said. Under the wings to see where the tentacles come from, Count M, you know. I think she's got them coiled up in retractable holes. Maybe don't physically harass the literal newborn sapient creature. I said, staring at Twill and Evelyn. I don't believe you too. Heath, Tenny fluttered at me. I went to the bathtub and patted her awkwardly on the head. She reciprocated, wrapping a spare tentacle around my wrist. It's medically necessary if we're to understand her, Evelyn said. We can hardly drag her in front of an X-ray machine or get her an MRI, can we? I gave her a look, too worn out for argument. But fine, yes. Evelyn held up a hand. She doesn't like it, my mistake. Fine, okay. She's so weird, Twill said. I could feel the tentacles going in and out. She's got no bones, all of her is just more tentacles inside. Yes, I noticed that too, I said. All muscle, aren't you? Buer, went Tenny. She's strong and cool, Lozzie said. I stayed for the rest of the bath, though most of the real work was over. Lozzie got Tenny to her feet and Rain rinsed her off one final time with the shower head, sluicing away any remnants of the sticky black amniotic fluid. As she stepped out of the bath, dripping wet, her tentacles reaching over to groom the fur on the underside of her wings, she left behind a soup of black-tinted water, soap scum, and mud. Evelyn sighed and said aside to Kimberly and I, what do you think, skim that stuff off. God alone knows what that crap will do to the drain pipes if we pull the plug. I'll get a bucket, Kimberly said. 5 microwave chicken nuggets, an apple, neatly peeled and sliced, a generous slice of chocolate cake. We lined up 3 plates on the kitchen table and stepped back. Well, Rain and Twill stepped back. I was too tired and comfy in my pajamas and Evelyn too stubborn to pull ourselves from our respective chairs. Lozzie was all over Tenny anyway, still drying bits of her with a huge fluffy bath towel, and Preem was already at the back of the room, waiting quietly in one of Evelyn's jumpers and a long skirt. Kimberly had excused herself, and I didn't begrudge her the sneaky smoke break. Twill stared wistfully at the nuggets and let out a little sigh. Wait your turn, Evelyn said to her, watching Tenny carefully. We were all watching Tenny. Tenny stared at the plates, bare toeless tar-black feet padding across the kitchen tiles as Lozzie coaxed her into the room. She studied our faces and looked out of the kitchen window for a bit, at the rain lashing down into the garden in the evening darkness. Her gaze wandered back to the plates, tentacles drifting up from beneath the shoulders of her flesh cloak, waving in the air like a mantle of snakes. I'm already missing bake-off, Twill tooted. You could at least feed me. You're saying you have less control than a newborn whatever she is. Evelyn gestured at Tenny. Moth, Preem intoned. Moth Girl, Rain said with a smirk. We are not calling her Moth Girl, said Evelyn. She isn't a superhero. She might be, you never know, Rain said. Tenny looked up, blinking huge void dark eyes at us again. Moth? She asked, in that voice of dry paper and ruffled feathers. Moth. Moth. She looked at me for guidance or approval, blinked twice, then sneezed loudly as Lozzie dried some stray water off her face with the towel. I hushed everyone. You're distracting her. Tenny, it's okay. Please, have something to eat. I gestured at the plates. Go ahead, it's for you. Ba-aya, went Tenny, and crept forward another pace. She knew we were watching her, waiting for something, but couldn't possibly understand what. The attention spooked her, perhaps confused her, and I wondered how fast she could learn social cues like this. She'd been able to speak as a spirit, directly into my mind, in a jumble of word concepts. Now she was picking up real words, spoken ones, with surprising rapidity for somebody literally born this afternoon. Cute perhaps, but not human. We had no idea what we were actually looking at here. What did she use for blood? What was her natural sleep cycle? Was she a non-breeding isolate or would she lay eggs in a dark corner? Did she see like us, or in infrared or some other spectrum? Could she fly, were the wings for show? What did she breathe? What were we to her friends, pack members, wise adults, blind idiots? Would she grow further? Did she know what she was? Experiments like these were necessary, Evelyn was right. To a point. Don't be scared, I said to her. We're all friends here. Foom, went Tenny. "'S'all right for you, sitting here at home," Twill hissed to Evelyn, but at least she was quieter now. "We were running round the woods all day." "You don't have to be here, you know," Evelyn muttered. "You could have gone home hours ago. Go have a family meal, home cooking, all that bollocks." "Maybe she wants your home cooking, Evie," I sighed. Heath dash Evelyn spat half my name, then cut herself off when Tenny looked at her again. Twill just grimaced and hid behind one hand. At least it shut them up for 5 seconds. Tenny kept squirming, distracted by Lozzie's attentions. Lozzie caught a stray tentacle in gentle hand and dabbed water from the surface, then took the opportunity to sneak a twist of towel in under one of Tenny's wings, trying to dry the complex area at the top of her shoulders. Tenny made a face like a cat getting scritches, quivering softly. Lozzie hummed at her, said, "Good girl," and half-sung the words. To some childhood bathtime song which I had the creeping feeling she'd grown up with. "Lozzie," I said. "Let her focus for a moment, please." "Tenny." "Heath," Tenny said, my name, truncated. Lozzie relented, hopped back a half step and rubbed at sleepy eyes. "It's for you, Tenny." I pointed at the food again. "Take whichever you want." "My money's still on the meat," Evelyn whispered. "She's a bug," Twill hissed back. "She'll eat fruit, right? Sugars and that. 5 pounds says you're wrong." Twill simmered in silence for a moment, then growled, "You're on." "She's looking at them." Lozzie stage whispered. "Mamoam," said Tenny. Her tentacles reached forward along the tabletop, reminding me of the way a small animal might sniff at unfamiliar food. Our experiment taught us very little and won nobody any bets because Tenny decided she wanted all of it. 3 of her tentacles split at the ends to reveal those perfectly sealed mouths full of tiny black needle teeth, and descended on all 3 plates at the same time. She crunched through the pieces of apple, hoovered up the nuggets, and bit the slice of cake clean in half. Crumbs scattered across the table as one tentacle tip chased bits of chocolate sponge around the edge of the plate. An extra tentacle crossed the table and dunked itself into a glass of water, then bulged like a snake swallowing eggs as it drank. "I don't know what I was expecting," Evelyn sighed. "At least we know she's not pure carnivore," Rain said. "That's lucky. Give it 5 minutes, see if she vomits it all back up." Twill frowned. Do you think she'd vomit from her mouth? Like, her regular mouth? Can we not talk about vomit, please? I said. As her tentacles fed, Tenny seemed to lose interest in the food, as if her tentacles and her main body could focus with ease on completely different matters. She pawed at the towel in Lozzie's hands, trying to help dry herself. Her human hands lacked the precision and grace of her tentacles, and she fumbled about, making Lozzie giggle as she flexed her wings out slightly and bumped one against the kitchen wall. Rain must have noticed my exhaustion more than I showed, because a moment later she was behind my chair, rubbing my shoulders with both hands, kneading out the tension and the knots and pressing the balls of her thumbs into the base of my neck. I let out a little grumble. I think that's one conclusion we can be confident about, Evelyn said, flat and dry. Tenny's respiratory and digestive systems are externally isolated. Elegant solution. It's clever. Lozzie smiled like a proud parent. I told you she was smart. Aren't you smart, Tenny? Yeah. Tenny said. You mean like, she can't ever choke on a piece of food? Twill asked. Exactly, Evelyn murmured, frowning softly, one hand toying with her empty mug on the table. She shot a sharp glance at Lozzie. You expect me to believe you didn't design that? Because that's a design element. A safety feature. I like it. Guess it is kinda stupid to have the breathing tube and the eating tube in the same place, Twill said, sticking her own tongue out as she looked down at her mouth. She grimaced, uncomfortable with the thought. Human body's weird. Yes, I murmured. Don't remind me. I didn't do any of it. Lozzie said. It's all Tenny. She's smart. Evelyn grunted. Well, whatever she's using for a brain, it certainly must be quite developed. Attention splitting like this. Even humans have trouble doing two separate tasks with different hands. As Tenny rubbed her fluffy head with a corner of the towel, her tentacles were still busy at work. One of them extended a tiny featureless black tongue to lick the grease from the chicken nugget plate, while another lifted the other plates to see if we humans had hidden more tasty treats underneath. A third tentacle seemed to be following an interesting scent, across the table and past one of the chairs, winding towards Twill. Yet another tentacle had picked up the now empty glass of water, waving it around near the sink and trying to figure out how to make the shiny metal spout produce more liquid. Lozzie hopped over and showed Tenny how to turn the tap, and yet another tentacle dipped around her to mimic the demonstration. I sighed inside, faintly jealous. My mind had seized up at controlling 6 extra limbs. Tenny didn't even have to concentrate. Can't do different things with each hand? Rain asked, a smirk in her voice. Speak for yourself. Heather can attest to my mad skills. A moment of silence passed over the kitchen, broken only by the rain against the windows, the muffled thumping of the dryer in the utility room, and the floorboard creaking sounds of Zheng adjusting her weight in the bathtub upstairs. Don't, Rain, I said. I don't have the energy to blush right now. If that zombie falls through the floor, Evelyn muttered, eyes on the ceiling, I'll bloody well murder her. She's not that heavy, I said. And she really needed to get clean. Should have hosed her off in the garden. Maybe if we put a couple dozen plates out, Twill said, we could find out how many tentacles she's really got. Counting didn't work, so why not stretch her skills? I'm not made of money, Evelyn said, still watching the ceiling, listening for Zheng again. You may as well be, Twill said. Evelyn gave her a darkly unimpressed look. Twill shrugged and opened her mouth to say something unkind. I could see it coming, the dismissive comment, the prickly challenge, the bizarre unspoken and perhaps unconscious desire to ruin what little rapport they had by constantly reducing each other to hostile caricatures. I sighed and prepared to scold her, tell her to play nice, maybe even just solve the whole damn thing for them and force them to talk properly for once. Rain squeezed my left shoulder a fraction of an inch too hard, turned my rebuke into a little gasp. Evie's upper middle class rich, not stupid money rich, Rain said before I could gather myself. Rain, Evelyn hissed. Twill frowned. That's still Dash. Her dad does still have to work, and that old family estate's pretty crumbling. Between maintaining this house, and covering some of the fallout of what we get up to, I can totally understand not wanting to drop £100 on chicken nuggets, to run a test for something that doesn't actually matter in the end. Isn't that right, Tenny? Does it matter how many you've got back there? Bah, Tenny said to Rain. See? She agrees. Twill opened her mouth to reply, glanced down at Evelyn and found her looking away, sullen and cold. Yeah, but like. But like what? Evelyn shot back. Twill looked away too, awkwardly crossing her arms over her chest. Never mind. Play nice, you two, I finally said, and felt terribly lame. Evelyn gave me a bit of a look. Twill shrugged. Lozzie was biting her lower lip, eyes wide as they bounced back and forth between Evelyn and Twill, hands clasped beneath her chin, having finally relinquished the towel completely to Tenny. She looked like she was watching a soap opera. No, she said softly as silence fell. Don't stop there. What? Evelyn squinted at her. A thump from upstairs interrupted us, followed by an audible slosh and a sound like a short-lived miniature waterfall. Evelyn frowned at the ceiling like it was about to come down on our heads, but number 12, Barneslow Drive was built to far better quality than some modern mockery of particle board and cheap prefab. The floorboards creaked as Zheng climbed out of the bath. I still need to find her some replacement clothes, I said to nobody in particular. Hey, what do I do here? Twill said suddenly, backing up toward the wall. Guys, this isn't, Dash. She was staring at the tentacle which had been slowly approaching her for the last few minutes. Tenny wasn't even paying attention to it, but the tentacle tip was very much paying attention to Twill. It zeroed in on her like a curious kitten, darting one way then the other, as if trying to sniff her out. Twill cringed to the side, then batted ineffectually at the tentacle with one hand. It dodged around her swat, came up inside her reach, and darted for her face. Twill jumped out of her skin, leapt back in a tumble of limbs as she blundered into the wall, and suddenly the tentacle was facing a maw full of canine teeth. Tenny turned in surprise, big black eyes blinking at Twill. No, no. Tenny said. We all stared at her. She's only playing, said Lozzie. Yes, Evelyn sighed. Stop overreacting. If she was doing that, she'd be considerably faster, I said. Tenny. Tenny, what do you mean, no? No, Tenny repeated, a weird fluttering noise beneath a flute of air, like a parrot with the lungs of a spider. No, touch. She just wants to pet you, Evelyn said with a nasty smirk and a shake of her head. Maybe she likes the smell of wet dog. Don't pretend you're any different, I said. Evelyn went red in the face and let out a splutter, but unfortunately Twill was too focused on the tentacle. Look, I'm cool with her and all, Twill said. But I don't want to get Dash. Without warning, the tentacle shot forward, right for Twill's face. Twill yelped, Lozzie gasped, I flinched in my seat through I was halfway across the room. Preem's hand shot out and grabbed it mid-flight. Tenny let out a noise like a squirrel hit by a flying rock. The tentacle in Preem's hand turned to face her, but Preem stared at Tenny's eyes, expressionless and impassive, milk-white eyes meeting void dark as Tenny looked back, huffing and hissing, a very unhappy puppy. Concentrate, Preem intoned. She let go. Tenny pulled the trapped appendage free, paused, and looked at Twill again. She tilted her head to the side almost all the way to the side, revealing just how far one could contort their body when not limited by silly things like having a spine. Ah, come on, don't do that exorcist shit at me. Twill said. Calm down, she's thinking, I said. Concentrating. Please, Tenny managed. The word was half mangled. She couldn't quite get the L sound right, rolled it at the top of her mouth, elongated the S too much and repeated the word twice, refining her own speech. Please. Please. The tentacle waved at Twill's face. Twill grimaced, looked to the rest of us for rescue. She won't hurt you, and she's asking nice, said Lozzie. Promise, yes Tenny. Probably just wants to pat your head or something, Rain said. Evelyn looked on, unamused. I wondered if she was jealous. In the corner of my eye I noticed another tentacle, one we'd all missed, creeping across the table and sneaking into the half-finished mug of coffee I'd been drinking from. It dipped inside and sucked up the dregs. A further tentacle slid past and right up to me. I offered it my hand, and it slipped in, wrapped around my fingers and palm and up my forearm. Warm, smooth, soft, but tough, human skin blended with silk and rubber. See? I held up the hand holding. A little unorthodox, but she's not trying to eat my hand or anything. She bites me, I'm gonna bite her back, Twill hissed through her teeth. Just like, don't stick it up my nose or anything, yeah. Then we're cool. Be cool, okay? Be cool. Tenny's exploratory tentacle edged forward. Twill grit her teeth, wincing in slow motion as it drew near her face. The tentacle brushed against Twill's hair, then twirled several locks of it around the tip, flicking it up and down. After 20 seconds of this, it became apparent to everyone watching that Tenny just wanted to play with Twill's hair. Why me? Twill asked, in the strangled voice one might use while being investigated by an elephant's trunk. You're the only one of us with curls, Rain said. Earls, went Tenny. She likes you. Deal with it, Evelyn said, a hint of strange bitterness in her voice, too many layers deep for Twill to notice right now. At least she's clean now, I said. You won't have to wash your hair. Clean, Tenny managed, though it sounded closer to cream. Lozzie praised her with much excited patting and negotiated the damp towel back out of her hands after a bit of gentle tugging. Okay, right, well. Twill still cringed away from the curious tentacle, but she also reached up and touched it, gently removing it from her hair as she stared at Tenny with a smile of forced politeness. Tenny tilted her head sideways again. Now that's over, can we eat something? I'm starving here. I don't like this uninhibited curiosity, Evelyn said. I blinked at her. Evie. This, Evelyn pointed at Tenny's smooth dark tentacles, 8 of them all over the kitchen by now. One was even worming its way into the utility room in the back, perhaps to investigate the muffled thump-thump-thump of the dryer hard at work. Tenny. Tenny. Evelyn clicked her fingers. Tenny looked around and stared at her. Evie, don't snap at her, I said. Are you intelligent enough to understand you can't do this in public, that you have to hide? Can you use those wings for that, are you even aware of that? Evelyn asked her, then sighed and shook her head when she got no reply but a blank stare. If she doesn't understand, then we're going to have to keep her confined, in the house. Indefinitely. Aw. Lozzie said with a long face. But she needs to learn how to use her wings. Evelyn turned cold eyes on Lozzie. And what if she flies over a farm, spooks some red-faced idiot with a flat cap and shotgun and takes a full load of buckshot in the chest? Or if she gets a taste for live meat again and snatches a child off the streets in Sherrowford? Or hell, if she's even seen, we'll have every UFO nutter and conspiracy crank in England descending on the city within days. Lozzie pouted, sad but not defiant. One hand lingered on Tenny's neck, fluffing her fur. Gah, went Tenny. I sighed, heavily. This conversation was inevitable, sooner or later, but I'd hoped Evelyn would put it to one side for at least the first night of Tenny's physical life. I rubbed the bridge of my nose, my eyes aching with tiredness. Part of me wanted to stand up and walk out and just let everyone else figure this out without me. What did somebody, normal, Twill made air quotes with one hand, even remember if they spotted her? Like, what would they actually see? That is the question, isn't it? I said. Cuteness. Lozzie declared. Now she was warm and dry and no longer dripping with her own amniotic fluids. Tenny looked even less human than when she'd slopped out of her cocoon. Dove white, velvet soft, varying in length from peach fuzz to inch-thick carpet round her belly and hips, her fur had fluffed up after a good clean, and the 5 or 6 minutes Lozzie had managed to make her sit still while subjected to a hairdryer. The fur on the inside of her wings was particularly dense, perhaps as insulation against the cold, and the wings themselves moved as she did, making little adjustments as they hung down around her body like a living cloak. She hadn't extended her wings to their full span again since the first stretch outdoors in the garden, which was lucky because she'd probably knock half the furniture over if she tried. The front room could perhaps accommodate a good stretch, but only if she stood sideways. As she moved, her wings seemed to briefly take on the coloration or outline of the kitchen cabinets and open doorway behind her, but the effect was always blurred, half-hearted, incomplete, an autonomic bodily function rather than conscious action. Her antennae twitched constantly, also on automatic. My private theory was that those functioned as hearing. No ears on the sides of her head. Perhaps she could hide, if one saw her at night, with her wings pulled tight like a real cloak, concealing the swirls and curves of fur on her midnight skin. And if she wasn't looking at you with those giant black eyes. Perhaps then, one could mistake her for a human being, however briefly. The Sherrowford Mothman, most likely, Evelyn said. Or a bag of carpet cuttings glued to an ambulatory 8-ball. Or they'd remember nothing except a screaming fit, a trick of the eyes, a ghost. How far does that kind of mental editing go? I asked. Could anybody actually see her for what she is? Evelyn shrugged and sighed. Search me, Heather, I don't bloody well know. Most zombies, demons, whatever, they break down long before they reach this level of irregularity. She gestured at Tenny, and Tenny watched her hand in motion, then moved a tentacle closer to Evelyn's chair. Evelyn watched it approach, unperturbed. Above our heads, the upstairs floorboards creaked softly as something massive stalked across them. Some may see the evidence of their eyes at first, Evelyn continued, then later deny what they saw. Others might panic, or remember nothing, not even see her. 1 or 2 might see but not react at all, and that would be very dangerous. I suppose we could invite your detective friend over and ask her what she sees. I think I broke in Miss Webb quite badly already, I said. We all did. What about that super long tentacle she had? Twill asked. She might sneak it out while we're not watching, right? I suspect that was only the pupa stage, I said. Still pneumosomatic. It did go dead in my hand before she woke up inside the cocoon. Yes, Evelyn tooted. Tenny's exploratory tentacle finished its approach, and Evelyn put one hand confidently on top of it, pinning it gently but firmly to the tabletop. Tenny let out a noise of complaint, and Evelyn fixed her with a look as she spoke. A 20-mile-long tentacle would require a much larger physical body, huge support structure, probably a different respiratory system as well, not to mention massive calorific intake. We're not outside, our reality can't support such things, not in the physical. She's made herself physical and human-sized, and that imposes certain limits. Doesn't it, Tenny? You might not know this, but the process of your metamorphosis certainly did. Tenny puffed her cheeks out, a mannerism I realized she'd picked up from Lozzie, and wriggled her tentacle out from Evelyn's trap. Nah, she fluttered. As long as we understand each other, Evelyn said. Be nice, Lozzie said, suddenly small and worried. Please. Evelyn almost snapped, but Lozzie's puppy dog eyes stopped her cold. She huffed and hesitated and opened her mouth to try again, then sighed and ran a hand over her face, looking away with embarrassment. Tenny's tentacle darted back, tapped her on the top of the head, and darted away again as she flinched and frowned at it. Tenny let out a rapid panting, throaty and jerky, like air forced through a paper flute. We all stared, and she trailed off, confused at our confusion. Was that a giggle? I asked. Startled by the strange, alien vocalization, we'd all missed the subtle tread of bare footsteps making their way down the stairs. Except Rain. She noticed, and when I looked back on the moment I realized she tightened her grip on my shoulders ever so slightly. She just thought it would be funnier this way. Evelyn sighed again. Look, Lozzie, I am trying to be nice. This is me, being nice. I am attempting to figure out how to dissuade Tenny from endangering herself. She can learn, Lozzie said. Can she learn fast enough? Evelyn gestured at Tenny, then tapped on the tabletop with a fingernail. Sherrowford is not tap the safest tap place tap. We never figured out if it was the tapping or the challenge. Evelyn swears the former was the cause. Lozzie thinks it was the latter, that Tenny had taken offense. Personally I think it had more to do with Jing appearing in the kitchen doorway like a huge, naked ghost. On the third tap, Tenny's wings exploded into a blur. One moment she was turning toward Zheng, all her tentacles whipping back to her shoulders, wings wrapping around herself like a cloak in a storm. The next moment she was gone. Oh! Lozzie clapped her hands. Bravo! Whoa, Twill said. About time, Evelyn drawled. Tenny had created an optical illusion. The space where she stood was now occupied by the shapes and shadows behind her, as if interpreted by an artist mainlining psychoactive drugs and seen through a chunk of glass or crystal. The exterior of her wings, part of which she'd somehow lifted over her head, a hood perhaps, matched the line of the kitchen doorway, the color of the cupboards, the fall of the shadows. I found myself blinking, struggling to focus on her. The visual effect made my eyes water, unless I stopped trying and just accepted she wasn't there. Shaman, Zheng purred, stepping into the kitchen, naked except for a single small towel hanging over her shoulder. A grin split her face. She knew exactly what she was doing. I need clothes. The imitative jumble where Tenny stood backed up a step and let out a muffled hiss. I tried not to stare at Zheng, and I failed. I'd never seen her clean before. Red chocolate skin steamed softly, her hair stuck up in all directions, the remains of her tattoos flexed across her abdomen and thighs and chest, marked with huge missing patches where I'd removed their power. A thick dark thatch of hair between her legs made my eyes pop out of my skull, before I mercifully managed to lower my head, hands up as if to protect myself, red in the face. Yes, clothes, good, yes, I stammered. Yes, very mature, indeed, Evelyn sighed. Discretion, better part of valor, Preem sing-songed. I wasn't sure if that was directed at Zheng's nudity or Twill's admiration. Rain was laughing. No, don't scare her. Lozzie said, not batting an eyelid at this sudden confrontational nudity. Her hands found Tenny's hood, or whatever it was, and tugged it down. Suddenly Tenny's white-furred head reappeared in mid-air, blinking those massive black eyes. Puppy, Zheng greeted her. Tenny hissed at her again, very loud, mouth wide open. Shaman, clothes, Zheng purred, ignoring Tenny and stepping closer. Lozzie managed to get her arms inside Tenny's wings somehow, holding her back, those several tentacles snaked overhead. Unless you prefer me naked? Maybe we should, dash. Let me take you upstairs, see if there's anything in my old wardrobe, Rain said, stepping back from my chair and imposing herself between Tenny and Zheng, looking the demon host up and down with a quick nod. Yeah, I think I've got some oversized stuff that'll last you the night, but we need to pick up something more your size, right? You can hardly come out shopping with us, but we can do that for you. Me and Heather, at least. Zheng gave her an amused look and a flash of teeth. Yashu. Can somebody get this naked woman out of the kitchen, please? Evelyn asked. I stood up too, face burning, mortified and aroused and embarrassed and feeling like the inside of my head was spinning out of control. Yes, of course, I dash. Hey, Heather, Rain said, and her tone was so easy, too easy, layered over an unquestionable command that could have told me to do anything in that moment. She caught my eyes, flint in her own. Relax, you've been going all day. Let me deal with this. Let me deal with clothing the giant zombie to whom you are terminally attracted, Heather. You're not going to be alone with her, not now, Rain's body language said. Sit down. I nodded. Averted my eyes. Okay. We really needed to have that talk. Didn't even think about the socio-economic angle between those two, Rain said. Some PPE student I am, hey. They're gonna have to talk that out themselves. You think they're up to it? She may as well have been speaking ancient Greek for all the sense I made of that. Rain was sat cross-legged on the foot of our bed. She was wearing a pair of shorts which showed off her legs, and the kind of t-shirt she only ever wore to sleep, vomit yellow with a faded logo on the front for a band called 3-Armed Sally, frayed a little at the collar, probably stolen from a live music show during her teenage homeless period. Television glow lit her face in profile. She'd booted up the PlayStation while waiting for me to finish in the shower. Sound down low, controller loose in her hands, she piloted an unnaturally energetic cartoon girl across some picturesque fantasy woodland, picking up mushrooms and herbs, occasionally pausing to hit a slime monster in a fight. Her fingers worked on automatic, still pressing buttons as she glanced over at me. Her hair was all chestnut brown disarray, still a little damp from the shower. She looked flushed. I wanted nothing more than to lie down on the bed and put my head in her lap. Perhaps unwisely, I resisted. I put my bath towel over my head and hid in the darkness. Heather. I understand each of those words in isolation, I said, muffled under my towel. But not in that order and not at the moment. I frowned with sheer mental exhaustion and lifted the towel to peer at her again. No, she was still there, toned thighs and damp hair null. What did that mean? Evie and Twill, she said, and paused the game. Heather, are you all right? Exhausted, inside and out, up and down. What about Evie and Twill? Could you explain, please, so I can confirm I'm not having a stroke or something? We'd finally finished returning some semblance of peace and quiet back to the house about half an hour ago, and capped the process off with a much-needed pair of overlapping showers, though I'd been far too tired to do anything fun. Just stood quietly under the stream of hot water as Rain had washed my hair. Finding clothes to fit Zheng had proved easier than we'd thought, though Rain was correct in her assumption that a shopping trip was in order, and soon. An old jumper with a hole in one armpit and a pair of pajama bottoms with a very generous elasticated waistband, they would tide my giant friend over for the night, but I doubt she'd want to be wearing them for long. As an added side effect, the lack of proper clothes would hopefully keep her from wandering off or returning to the woods, at least until I could snatch enough rest to get my head around her. Evelyn had suggested we clear out one of the upstairs rooms for her, but by that time we were all spent. Zheng had shrugged and grunted and propped her feet up on the kitchen table. Lozzie had succumbed to her creeping sleepiness again, at least for now, and Tenny was wrapped up in bed with her. None of us had the slightest clue how much sleep Tenny would require, but she'd seemed entirely happy to curl up against Lozzie's side, her tentacles wandering around the spare room to latch onto the door frame, the windowsill, Lozzie's arm, like a spider suspending itself from a web. She'll sleep till she's done, Lozzie had murmured when I'd asked, one of her eyes fluttering shut, the other squinting. She had her arms around Tenny, and they looked so comfortable I was almost tempted to join them. Done. She knows not to wake everyone up. Isn't that right, Tenny? You up, Tenny had fluttered. Up. Say goodnight to Heather now. Auntie Heather. Gwa, Heather, Tenny had managed. If I'd been more awake I think I would have died. Nobody had seen Kimberly since she'd retreated from the chaos, but Rain took the plunge and checked on her. I'd tagged along. We'd found her sitting knees to chest in the chair in Evelyn's study, eyes red-rimmed with THC, reading a battered, dog-eared copy of The Mists of Avalon. We'd left her to it. The last we'd seen of Twill was from the far side of a massive ham sandwich she'd been constructing in the kitchen, casting suspicious glances at Zheng's closed eyes and regular breathing. "She's faking it," Twill had hissed. "Probably doesn't even need sleep." Evelyn was downstairs too, in her workshop. Or maybe she'd gone to bed already. I'd lost track. "I mean, there's a class gap between Evie and Twill, right?" Rain said as I finished drying my hair. "Twill's family isn't dirt poor, but they're not well off. I guess a small-time cult without active recruiting doesn't exactly rake in clandestine funds. Her dad used to be in the army, but that was years ago, and her mum's a schoolteacher at the primary in Brinkwood. And our Evie, well. Technically her dad's not Petty Borge, but," Rain shrugged and pulled an ironic smile. "She is loaded. Twill's right about that." "Okay, and they probably need to talk that out, if they're ever gonna, you know." Rain spread the first and middle fingers of her right hand, and stuck her tongue between them. I gave her an unimpressed look. She laughed. I walked over to the bed and flopped down. I'd intended to sit, but my body didn't obey, unfolding across the sheets as I closed my eyes. "No," I said. "No, I don't think they could talk about money. They can't even talk about their own feelings. Maybe if we lock them in a room together and put up a sign that reads like, 'This door will only open if you snog for 5 minutes.'" Rain's fingers found my hair. She combed it back, away from my face, then scratched my scalp, hard enough to force a little groan from my throat. Firm and confident, her hand traveled down the back of my neck, and squeezed in the exact way to make me purr. "No," I said. "No. No, as in, we're not going to leave it up to chance. We're going to cut this Gordian knot for them." I cracked open my eyes, found myself staring at Rain's bare thigh, the video game paused on the television screen beyond. "On second thought, I'm going to cut the knot. You should stay out of it." "What, you think I'm a bad matchmaker?" I looked up at Rain, her face upside down from my perspective. "You can never resist teasing Evie. Got me dead to rights there, yeah. Plus it's less like matchmaker, more like peace negotiator. There's so much tension between those two, they'll explode sooner or later if it's not resolved." I closed my eyes again. Everything felt so heavy. "You sure you're all right, Heather?" I shrugged. "Overtired. Jealous. Busy day. Sides hurt." "Jealous?" Rain asked. Rain's hand slipped beneath the collar of my pajama top and found my shoulder, and I knew what would happen next. She would set the PlayStation controller aside and switch the television off, and turn all her attention to me. Maybe we'd have sex, but more likely she'd just rub my shoulders, my back, my belly, until I fell asleep, and then she'd help roll me into bed, semi-conscious Heather clinging to her like a sleepy koala bear. We'd snuggle up under the sheets and I'd feel safe and protected and normal, and for a few hours of shared drowsing I'd be able to forget everything. I'd wake in the morning, and having put it off for one night I'd put it off for another, and it would fester and grow until a rotten abscess ate at my heart. But I was so tired. I wanted rain, and sleep, and not to think. Luckily for me and for the health of my relationship, my phantom limbs didn't give a hoot about how tired I felt. As I lay there on the verge of giving in, they were trying to push me up into a sitting position. A dull, quivering ache ran along my flanks, a faint muscle spasm below the surface. 5 of the 6 tentacles, ghosts of potential from my memories of the abyss, uncoiled and pushed at the bed, braced themselves to take my weight. One tried to wrap around my upper body, to pull me up. They couldn't touch anything, but the pain in my side spiked and prickled all the same. I hissed through my teeth. All right, I grumbled. The tentacles were right. Ape Comfort wanted rain, but rational thought, cold abyssal survival logic knew that I had to talk to Rain now, or I never would. I drew willpower from that writhing core of inhuman drive in the core of my soul, sighed, and stole myself for the task. Heather. Snuffing, I lied, then reached up, found Rain's wrist, and halted her hand. Hey, Heather, you're exhausted, yeah. Let me pamper you, come on, you need to wind down. Rain pulled her wrist free, but I was already struggling back into a sitting position. Struggling more than I expected. Couldn't sit up. One hand slipped and I fell back to the bed, confused with a second of dull panic, muscles not working right. My phantom limbs flailed, sent another shiver of shock up my sides, and I realized what the problem was. They weren't helping. The tentacles didn't exist, not unless I built them from scratch with hyperdimensional mathematics. They weren't there. They couldn't take any weight, not really, but my brain insisted they should be able to. Heather. Heather. Rain was saying my name, but I barely heard her. For several long moments I had to concentrate with total focus on the act of sitting up, on the simple motions of my hands and the tired muscles in my back and sides. Eyes squinted, teeth clenched, moving with the mechanical precision of a robot, I pulled myself into a sitting position, trying to suppress phantom pain from limbs that I didn't really have, trying to remember how to pilot this golem of water and protein. Something alien and invasive and floppy and soft brushed against my face. Hisses. And then perception snapped back, vision resolved into Rain's face. She had both her hands raised in gesture of "I'm not touching you" caution. I felt my cheeks flush bright red. Rain, I'm so sorry, I don't know what I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Oh God, did I hiss at you? Rain kept her hands up where I could see them, and looked at me with open curiosity, as if waiting to see if I'd do that again. Then she broke into a smile. You do that loud enough, she said, Evie's gonna think we're up to some real kinky shit in here. Rain, I sighed, felt myself deflate, my horror punctured by her irreverent joke. I put my face in my hand and my other hand against my racing heart. I can't believe I hissed at you. I didn't mean anything by it, I was just confused because I was trying to sit up, but I couldn't remember how, like my body was alien for a moment, Rain hushed me gently. She touched a finger to my lips, and this time I didn't hiss at her. I get it. I understand. It's just you, being you, and hey, I think that's pretty cool. She trailed her finger downward and cupped my chin. Gotta come at you from below, not surprise you from above, huh? I rolled my eyes and blushed for a slightly different reason, still mortified at myself. Here, one SEC, Rain said. She put down the PlayStation controller at last and stretched across me to reach her bedside table. I wasn't sure if it was intentional, but the sight of the back of her bare legs hugged by the cuffs of her bedtime shorts went rather a long way to soothing my discomfort. She rummaged for a moment amid the detritus of books and lip balm and keys and a handheld torch and her knife, then sat back again holding a very familiar black body art pen. Bless her, Rain always knows the right thing to do. We didn't even need to exchange any words, we slipped into the ritual with the comfort of long-repeated habit. I scooted against the wall at the head of the bed, a pillow propped in the small of my back, and Rain settled in at my side. I hooked my legs over hers and pulled my left sleeve all the way up before offering her my exposed forearm. She took it gently, laid it across her lap, and examined the fractal written on my flesh. Rain traced the lines on my forearm with the tip of the pen, and I concentrated on not feeling ticklish. The patter of rain on the window drowned out our own breathing, drowned out my thoughts. Eventually I felt enough like myself again, settled back in my body in this shared intimacy, that I gathered what was left of my courage. Rain, we still need to talk. About what I said earlier today. She glanced at me, then back at the fractal, tracing over a line again. Yeah, I've been thinking about it too. My stomach gave a lurch. You have? Rain took her sweet time over another branch of the reality hacking symbol on my arm, and I couldn't stand the wait. She finished up, capped the marker pen, then caught my wrist as I went to pull my arm back. She raised my hand to her lips and kissed my palm, watching my eyes. "Our problem," she said, "is that I want what you want. But you don't know what you want." I huffed a huge sigh, disappointed. "Don't give me that nonsense." "Nonsense?" She smirked. "Never. You practically marked your territory in front of Zheng today. That was pretty clearly something you wanted, your feelings, your jealousy. That wasn't you channeling my wants, that was you." "Is that what you want to be?" she asked. From anybody else this question would be a barbed goad. Rain actually meant it. "You want to be my territory?" I stared at her in disbelief for a second, then huffed again and pulled my hand from her grip to rub at my eyes. "Aren't I already?" "Rain, you obviously weren't comfortable about me talking to Zheng by myself, not without making it abundantly clear that I'm yours. So why keep joking about threesomes, why push me toward her like you did? I don't understand this. A relationship goes both ways, you just wanting what I want isn't enough. And I don't believe it anyway." Rain nodded slowly, as if taking all this in, then asked, "Do you want to have sex with Zheng?" If I'd rolled my eyes any harder, my retinas would have detached. I could have screamed at her. "That has nothing to do with what I'm trying to say." "SGOT everything to do with it," Rain said, soft and calm, a subtle smile on her lips. Was she enjoying my frustration? Serious question. "I won't be hurt if you do want to, it's obvious she fires you up. Nothing wrong with honest attraction." I shrugged with my hands, beyond exasperated, almost lost for words. "Seriously," Rain continued, and flashed one of those grins at me, burning with inner confidence. She looked so easy and relaxed, so unbothered by all this. "I'm not gonna be hurt, not gonna be offended. I know I'm still the best, in or out of bed. Doesn't matter where else you go, I'm always with you. I could beat Zheng in a fight too, I know that now, I've got her number, I've got a read on her, right down to the margins. I don't feel threatened by her, or jealous or anything like that. She's not gonna take you away from me or anything, that's just silly." Rain. Okay. Slow and soft the revelation broke inside me. "Oh my God. Heather. You are jealous. Rain, you are jealous, deeply. You're just expressing it in a very you kind of way." "Oh, wow, okay." I wet my lips and weighed the pros and cons of putting it into words. Cold sweat broke out on my back, balanced by a dangerous fire deep down in my belly. I had stepped, pace by pace, into a minefield, the limits of which I did not comprehend. When had Rain changed her mind? I raced back through the events of a very busy day, and settled on the moment she'd scored a hit on Zheng's arm with her knife, when they'd almost fought in the woods. She'd drawn blood, had seemed ready to fight to the death and then given up that fight, totally and completely. Rain had resolved her jealous feelings by verifying she could brutally murder the object of my sexual distraction. She hadn't actually done so. Just proved, to herself, that she could. "You are jealous. Maybe you don't see what I see here," I said slowly. "Or maybe you're lying to yourself, I don't know, but it's kind of obvious to me. Why else did you mark your territory? Why kiss me like that in front of Zheng?" "Because Rain paused, hesitated, so unlike her. "Because I wanted to." "That's a start. And why did you want to?" "I want what you want, Heather," she said, and I almost groaned and gave up. I don't know how else to phrase that. Seeing you happy, or fulfilled, helping you get there, being there with you, that's what I want. What if I said I want you to be jealous? I threw out a curveball, a shot in the dark. An intense, predatory glint slid into Rain's eyes, up from some deep place in her soul, accompanied by a subtle twist to her smile as she watched me. "Go on. Rain. Go on," she repeated, and a tremor sank through my belly, heading down. I swallowed, pulled myself together, and it all came out in a rush. I want you to be jealous because I don't want some platonic ideal of you, I want you. Mess and confusion and all. And if that means you're jealous of the way Zheng unintentionally turns me on, then so be it. You don't have to pretend to be perfect. Being okay with me sleeping with Zheng is not perfect, it's I don't know, but it's obviously causing you something. Something I can't figure out. If you're jealous, then express it. Let's do something about that. Do what? I don't know. That's up to you. Rain watched me for another second, slow and knowing. My stomach turned over, full of butterflies. I swallowed, hard, and wasn't entirely sure why. Rain. Rain disentangled herself from me, got up from the bed, and went over to the door. She opened it and stuck her head out into the corridor, dark now, the night rain pattering on the windows, gentle light from our bedroom creeping out into the gloom. She looked left and right, closed the door again, and turned to me with her back against the wood. Do you need to be punished? She asked. My eyes went wide and my mouth went dry. My heart rate spiked. I'm sorry, what? You heard me, Heather. Rain smiled, slow and subtle. Rain? What does that mean? I don't understand. Rain pushed away from the door, stalking toward the bed, slow and certain. You want to know if I'm jealous or not? Rain dash, I almost scooted away from her. She stopped, held up both hands. You could walk out of this room right now and climb all over Zheng and order her to eat you out, and I'd never harbor the faintest anger against you. But yeah. Rain grinned wide. I might fight her. And I'd win. And you'd need to be punished afterward, for being a little brat. Rain, this isn't what I meant. I could barely squeeze the words out. My heart was going 100 miles an hour. Rain hadn't even touched me and she had me flushed in the face, something about the way she moved, the way she looked at me, that clear fluidity of muscle. She was already a guilty dream at the best of times with her ruffled hair and rakish smile and athletic frame, but now she advanced on me with all the predatory intent that made my head spin. I meant, don't put on act, you don't have to, I dash. It's no act. You want me to be clear? This is me being clear. She climbed up onto the mattress, on all fours. I backed away to make room for her, but then Rain caught me in her gaze like a mouse before a snake, froze me to the spot. She straddled me, knees either side of my hips, a hand pinning one of my wrists to the bed. Oh, I managed. Okay. I want you to be happy, Heather, she said, close and soft, right above me. If that means you get a bunch of girls together in a harem, so be it, whatever. I'll be a little jealous, sure, but it won't hurt me. I'll always be number one. I nodded, pretty much all I could think of doing. But, Zheng, well, she said. It's different. Not sure why. Would this dash, I squeaked, swallowed, and tried again. Would this be any different if it wasn't Zheng? If it was somebody like, I don't know, Kimberly. Somebody less similar to you. Less of a rival. Less of a monster, you mean? You're not a monster. You didn't answer the question. I managed. Rain ran a hand through her hair. She pretended to consider for a moment, never once breaking eye contact. I don't want you to have sex with Zheng. You can cuddle up with her, you can hug her, you can ride on her shoulders for all I care. But I don't want you to screw her. Can't stop you, won't stop you, but yeah, you're right, I don't want you to. Well done, Heather. You cracked my code. That doesn't Rain, well, thank you for being clear, I dash. Just remember, Rain purred as she leaned in close, slipped her head past mine and whispered in my ear, so close I could feel her breath. Her free hand found my thigh, squeezed roughly, made me jerk and squeak in surprise. I'm a much bigger monster than she is. I gasped as her hand moved higher. Rain, why dash? You want me to mark my territory? Want me to show you how I feel? Bite the pillow. 2 hours later I stepped out of the bathroom on very shaky legs, and straight into a split second of pure dissociation. The warm, womb-like darkness of the upstairs corridor. My own body, still flushed and hot and sore, a lingering ache between my legs. Rain's taste in my mouth and my own sweat-drenched animal smell in my nostrils. The faint spill of artificial, television blue light from our open bedroom door, rained back on the PlayStation while I'd gone to the bathroom. All around me the house was washed with the static of raindrops on windows and roof, filled with sleeping minds around dark corners, quiet minds in the night, lurking as if under rocks or inside little caves. For an illusory moment I felt as if I could sense all the people in the house, slumbering on the edge of my consciousness. For a moment, a fleeting post-coital illusion, I felt like I was back in the abyss. Then it passed, and I was just plain Heather again, standing in the corridor as my phantom limbs groped about for handholds in the dark. I closed my eyes and tried to recapture the moment, that peace and familiarity, like I'd been to the bottom of the ocean. Maybe I didn't need to go swimming at all, maybe I just needed rain to screw me so hard I dissociated. Heather. Rain's nighttime stage whisper came from our open door. You all right? Yes, I whispered back. Sorry. Was thinking. I padded down the dark corridor, following the television's glow. Rain was right where I'd left her, lying on her front in a tangle of sheets, arms sticking out with the PlayStation controller in her hands. She blinked a bleary smile over at me, caught in the television backwash like undersea luminescence. I think I'd done as much of a number on her as she'd done on me. "Wanna sleep now?" she whispered. I glanced down the hallway to the head of the stairs. The faintest light glowed up from below, not the kitchen, but deeper than that. I let out a little sigh. I think Evie's still awake, I said. In her workshop. I'd like to check on her, make sure she's okay. A tiny pinprick of liar's guilt opened a nick in my heart. Do you want to come with me? You want me to? Rain blinked slowly at me again. I'd well and truly exhausted her. It's okay. I need some water too. I stepped into our room and over to the chair by the desk, pulled out a jumper at random, and found one of Rain's older hoodies in my hands, black and frayed and very large on me. I wiggled it on over my head. The sleeves were too long and it smelled of her and I loved it. I wrapped it close, pressed the ends of the sleeves to my face. On the television screen, the energetic cartoon girl was jumping up and down over and over. Rain caught my look and laughed at herself, waggled the controller and pressed the jump button again. Her boobs bounce when you make her jump, she explained. Good for her. Don't wait up for me, I promise I'll join you after I've spoken to Evie, if she's awake. If not, well, I'll ask Preem to carry her to bed. What if she's with Twill? I hadn't thought of that. I suppose I'll leave them to it. You're a good friend, Heather, Rain said, paused her game, and rolled over in bed. She closed her eyes, crawled under the sheets. A good friend and a better partner than you credit yourself with. Be back in a bit, I whispered, and set off into the depths of the house. As soon as I got halfway down the stairs and out of earshot, I sighed to myself. On one hand, I felt such relief. Rain had finally put her foot down. She'd made clear where she stood, and what she wanted from me. Our relationship now had a boundary, even if it might not apply to other situations. Don't have sex with Zheng. On the other hand, had she done all that only because I'd said I wanted her to be jealous? I didn't think so, but I couldn't be certain. Rain didn't fake emotions, she didn't pull them from some long-practiced library of how to pretend not to be a cold-hearted serial killer. She felt, for real. She was just different. And devoted, to an extent and in a way which I did not understand. I couldn't entirely shake the feeling that her possessive display had been just that, a display. At least she gave me an easy stipulation to follow. Don't have sexual relations with the violent cannibal demon lady you've just adopted into the household. Easy. I crept down the creaking stairs and across the darkness of the front room, listening for voices. If I heard Twill and Evelyn speaking, I'd turn around and go back. Though perhaps not before a few seconds of accidentally on purpose eavesdropping. A faint electrical hum lurked on the edge of my hearing, like an old CRT television. I heard the sound of a page turning, and a heavy sigh. I followed the twilight and the sigh into the gloomy kitchen, and confirmed my suspicions. Evelyn's workshop door was open, a light on within. Zheng was still in the kitchen, sitting in one of the chairs like a frozen statue, feet up on the table, arms crossed, eyes closed. The huge ancient yellow jumper and green pajama bottoms looked totally out of place on her, like dressing a Greek goddess in a cheap tracksuit. She should be wearing medieval armor, I suddenly thought. She hadn't moved in hours. Or at least, looked like she hadn't. Zheng. I whispered, and got no response. An inquisitive grumble emerged from the open workshop door. A chair scooted back, papers shuffled, and a walking stick clacked against the floorboards. Evelyn appeared in the doorway a moment later, in cream jumper and long skirt. She raised an eyebrow at me. "Evie," I whispered. "You're up really late." "So are you," she said, not in a whisper. "You've had a long day. You should be asleep." "So should you," I tooted. She nodded at Zheng. "She's pretending, by the way. We were speaking not 5 minutes ago." Without opening her eyes, Zheng cracked a smile, lips peeling back to reveal her mouth full of sharp teeth. "I was asleep, wizard. You woke me." "Really?" Evelyn drawled. "Zheng, you know you're welcome to sleep somewhere more comfortable," I said. "You don't have to sleep in a chair. I know we're short on properly cleared out rooms, but there's always a sofa. I promise we'll at least sort out a mattress for you tomorrow." "I sleep better like this," Zheng purred. I shared a glance with Evelyn. She shrugged with her eyes. "Well," I said. "Have it your way then." Zheng grunted. She sniffed the air, then cracked open an eye and looked at me. "You reek of sex, shaman." A blush exploded onto my cheeks. I let out a little huff and averted my eyes and didn't know what to say. "Oh," Evelyn deadpanned. "Thought I heard some thumping." Zheng chuckled, closed her eye again, and seemed to settle back into an instant sleep. I stood there like a fool for a moment, blushing terribly, wishing I could fold myself up inside Rain's hoodie and slink back upstairs. Evelyn shuffled back into the drawing room, and for want of anything else to say, I followed her. She settled herself back down onto a chair at the old dining table as I stepped inside, and questioned me with a raised eyebrow. "I wanted to check on you," I said. "You're up super late." "I think it's past midnight." I let my eyes rove over the additions to the workshop, and felt my blood go cold. Did you do this all today?" While you lot were out gallivanting around the woods." "Is it safe?" A bulky old CRT television stood at one end of the table, half of its mechanical innards hanging out of the back, loose circuit boards and frayed wiring exposed like a gutted animal. It was contained inside a very fresh-looking but very simple magic circle, a single line with some Arabic text around the circumference, painted on a piece of plain canvas laid out underneath the television. A thick red cable like a car jumper lead emerged from the back of the modified television, crossing the room and snaking across the floor. The other end of the cable terminated in a massive copper crocodile clip, embedded deep in the clay flesh of the squid vessel thing which contained the eye's minion. It looked as if it had been weakly pulling at the clip for hours without end, two of its dried, flaky tentacles worn down to crumbled stubs, still waggling ineffectually at the cable. The whole thing had moved several inches back, as if trying to cram itself into the corner of the magical circle it was contained within. As I stared, it twitched and flexed another rotten, crumbling tentacle, gesturing at nothing. "Quite safe," Evelyn said. "I had Preem do the handling." And this is warded. She reached out and tapped the magic circle which entrapped the television set. It can't jump the air gap and possess me again, if that's what you're worried about. Also, I think it might be dying. The television was on. I could see the plug, sitting there on the table, most definitely not supplying electricity, yet the television screen flickered with abstract, overlapping, multicolored shapes, most of them with dozens upon dozens of sides like some kind of mathematical constructs. They were seen as through layers of shadows moving across water, some kind of interference with the television's display. The screen flickered and the picture dissolved into a view of a blank wall made of black bricks, then flickered again and the wall was covered with tiny red writing, then flickered back to the abstract shapes again. What am I looking at? Evie. Evelyn shrugged and let out a sigh. The inside of its mind, I think. Or it's trying to communicate. I don't know. Sometimes it shows writing, like then, but the language is nothing from our world. This is what I spent all day on, trying to interrogate it. She flicked at the pile of notes she'd taken. For all the good it's produced. That's an ingenious idea, certainly. Are you absolutely sure this is safe? Mostly. She shrugged at me with her eyes, and gestured at the squid of rotting clay. Our uninvited guest here is far less complex than, say, Preem, but I think it exists in the same way as her, started out like her, perhaps. Summoned from elsewhere, but it didn't learn how to think from humans. She glanced at me. Maybe from your eye, perhaps. I don't think it can plan, or make independent decisions. If it could, it would be trying to break containment now. It's got access to an information vector right here in this telly. But it's not even trying. It's just showing me its thoughts. You should really sleep, Evie. It's really late. Thinking about this all day can't be good for you. Sleep, Preem intoned, and I almost jumped out of my skin. I hadn't seen her standing there, just off to the right. I stared at her for a moment. She stared back. Sleep, she repeated. Evelyn sighed, and turned the television off. Perhaps, she said. Don't feel like it though. Me neither, I admitted, and pulled up a chair, sitting down to soothe my still shaky legs. For some odd reason, I didn't want to go back upstairs. Evelyn frowned at me. Heather? Are you all right? I shrugged. Sometimes I forget that Rain is a sociopath. That's not entirely accurate. Did she do something to you? What? No, not at all. It's complicated. Relationship stuff, I guess. Oh, Evie, I don't know what I'm doing. Can I talk to you about this? Evelyn leaned back in her chair and snorted a humorless laugh. You want to come to me for relationship advice? Little miss, I just spent 2 hours having sex, and you want to talk to me? My turn to roll my eyes. Evelyn, you are my best friend. And you understand Rain better than I do, I think. You've known her for longer. I knew it, she has done something, hasn't she? No, I tooted. I don't know how to handle this situation. Where I think she might be taking this. I glanced at the door again and lowered my voice. I think she's jealous of Zheng, but in a way I didn't expect. I outlined what had happened, not just upstairs between Rain and I, but earlier in the day too, the confrontation in the woods, the pact they'd made over me. I repeated Rain's words about how she could beat Zheng anytime, if she so chose to. Evelyn listened politely, frowning harder and harder as I finished. You want to have sexual relations with that barbarian in the kitchen, was the first thing she asked. No. Not a little bit, but no, not really, I don't think so. It's not as if I'm incapable of self-control. Look, Evie, that's not the point, it's Rain that dash. Yes, Evelyn waved me down, then sighed. Of course she's jealous, anybody would be. Yes, but only Rain deals with jealousy by deciding she can beat a demon in a knife fight. I hope this won't go any further, but I'm not sure. I'm worried I don't know, exactly. Like I said, sometimes I forget rain can be frightening, I suppose. I really don't want her to get hurt, Evie. Emotionally or otherwise. Evelyn stared at me for a moment, sucking on her teeth. You're looking at this wrong. I am. Heather, I told you before, months ago, that Rain wants to be your knight errant. That's the role she's dreamed up for herself in life, it's how she fits together, and she needs a damsel to play opposite her or she goes looking for other causes. I used to be that to her, and I suspect if I'd not been a sexual cripple, if I'd showed the slightest interest, she might have made a move on me. Seriously? You're not Dash. Not her type, yes, exactly. Evelyn shrugged. I suspect, that's all. But then she found you, and you're perfect for her. Don't make me spout a bunch of soppy nonsense, but it's true. You and her fit together surprisingly well. Even now you've, well, gained some confidence, she's still all over you. Evelyn pointed at the closed door to the kitchen, but really she was indicating what lay beyond, sitting there with her feet up on the table. But now you have another protector. Yes, but I'm not going to sleep with Zheng. I've told her that now, and I won't break that promise. You're missing the point, Evelyn almost snapped. The romance, the sex, it's secondary. I think you're right. If you decided to go kiss Kimberly or me, or I don't know, Lozzie, I don't think Rain would care much. Rain, first and foremost, wants to be your primary protector. That's the pillar of her psyche. That's the rivalry which matters to her. Perhaps unconsciously so. I sighed and nodded, sagged in the chair and rubbed my face. Evie was just telling me what I already knew, but hadn't wanted to accept. I don't know how to handle that, I said. Me neither. Evelyn glanced at the door again. Stroke of genius by that demon, making her swear a pact in front of you. Otherwise they'd be at each other's throats. I suppose there's that. To be thankful for. Evelyn watched me for a moment. I hugged Rain's hoodie tight around myself, staring at the floor. Just talk to her, Heather, I'm sure she'll understand. She adores you. She'd do anything for you. I know, I said, then glanced around the room, trying to distract myself. Speaking of talking, where's Twill? She went home. I glanced at the windows, hidden behind thick curtains, but the patter of rain against the glass penetrated the whole house. At this time of night? She's hardly a wilting violet, Evelyn said, turning to her notes. She'll be fine. Evie, you let her go. She's an adult, she can make her own decisions. Besides, this house is reaching carrying capacity. She could have slept on the sofa or something. I sighed. She could have slept in your bed. With you. Hint hint. Evelyn's stare could have sandblasted rock. You didn't make her leave, did you? I asked. No, yes. Maybe. Evelyn straightened up and huffed. We had a very awkward conversation, all right. Things got weird. I had to resist a very specific urge to put both hands to my mouth. Did you tell her what you dash? Discussed Tenny, Preem supplied in a sing-song voice. Bake Off. Sleeping arrangements. Yes, and that was all, thank you very much, Preem. Evelyn shot the doll demon a nasty look. I sighed. Evie, I don't know why you and her don't just talk to each other. Oh wow. I shook my head, feeling my heart catch in my chest, a lightness in my head. Was I really about to do this? Did I have the right? I'd been so sure while talking to Rain earlier, but now I had to force the words out. I'm really not sure I should tell you this, but Twill, well, I'm pretty sure she kind of likes you. In that sort of way. I think if you talked to her about it, she'd say the same things to you. Evelyn stared at me, deadpan and blank. Evie? I'm not a complete idiot, Evelyn said. And despite her appearances, neither is Twill. I think after your little display earlier, it was blindingly apparent to everyone present. Even Tenny, and she'd just been born. You mean you dash? Twill knows. All right. Evelyn snapped. She knows that I know, and I know she knows that I know. We both know. Did you talk to her about it? Evelyn looked away, uncomfortable. What do you think? You didn't. You didn't. Yes, I'm a coward. You know that already. No, you're not. Evie, you're not a coward. Don't treat yourself like that. Evelyn threw up her hands in irritation and turned back to the notes and papers and sketches on the table, sorting through them angrily, shoving them into a pile. Fetch me some chocolate, she barked at Preem. Sod it, I may as well. Preem obeyed, opening the door and marching out into the kitchen. Evelyn and I were greeted by the sight of Zheng, eyes open and awake, a subtle grin on her lips. Wizard, she rumbled. The shaman was right, you do like the smell of wet dog, right up in your cu dash. If looks could kill, Evelyn's scowl would have reduced Zheng to atomic dust. You mock this, demon, and I'll send you back where you came from. Zheng shrugged and closed her eyes again. Don't tempt me. Evelyn stared at her for a moment longer, looking like she was about to lurch out of her seat and have a go at Zheng with the business end of her walking stick, but Preem strode back into the room and offered Evelyn a Yorkie bar fetched from the cupboard. Evelyn tore it out of her hand, ripped the wrapper open, and shoved a segment of chocolate into her mouth, chewing with determination. She swallowed, thought for a moment, and offered the bar to me. No thanks, not right now, too late at night, I said. What if I only like her because she's available? Evelyn asked the table, then me. Because she's what's here. She deserves better than me and I'm only attracted to her because she happens to be nearby. She bit into another piece of chocolate, drowning her sorrows in cheap dietary serotonin. Rain and I are no different, I said. Evelyn frowned at me as she chewed, so I carried on. If I hadn't settled on university in Sherrowford, if I hadn't gone to that exact cafe in the student quarter on that exact morning, if I hadn't been sick, if she hadn't decided to come after me, we'd have never met. It's all chance. You have to take what opportunities life gives you, I think. There's precious little happiness in the world, don't snub it when it could be yours. Evelyn stopped chewing. She met my eyes for a long moment, then looked away, down at the tabletop. For a second I thought she was going to cry. Great, she grumbled. Just what this house needs. More dykes. Evie, don't use that word. What? Dyke? It's what I must be, right? Why can't I say that? Because you're using it as a roundabout way to insult yourself. Evelyn shook her head, grumbling under her breath. That's not really what's bothering you though, I said, and it wasn't a question. I let her finish, and when I was sure she was done, I reached out and squeezed her hand. Evie, you're worthy of love too. I think you should maybe say those words, those exact words you said just now to Twill. She'll understand. See how she feels. Evelyn grumbled, shrugged, and finished her chocolate bar. Is that why you've been distracting yourself with this? I sat back and glanced at the television and the squid thing in the corner with the jumper cable attached to it. It's something to do. Figuring out the emissary of an alien god is less frightening than, she sighed heavily, romance. You and me both. You don't feel like going back upstairs, she asked, straightening up in her chair, then glanced at Preem and nodded to the door. The doll demon closed it again, shutting us in the magical workshop together. Not just yet, I admitted, then frowned to myself and glanced over at the clay squid thing again, at its faint and feeble efforts to free itself. Don't you want to check on Lozzie? Make sure she's not getting her hair eaten by her pet? Tenny's not a pet, I muttered, half distracted. She'll be fine. Evie, turn that television back on, would you? If it's safe, that is. I turned to her, and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Heather. Let's put our heads together. I've got an idea. Knowledge takes two paths. The first is the eureka moment, the leap of discovery, the flash of a magic eye picture resolving into a leaping dolphin. Archimedes in his bathtub, Newton under the apple tree, the elegant terror of the splitting atom. Oft romanticized but rarely experienced, the domain of great man theory and a history of thought with time for only the brightest of shining landmarks. The second kind is boring and slow, but we owe it so much more. Methodical categorization. Repeated experiments. Close reading. Stubborn, bullheaded, constant investigation that grinds along week after week, month after month, year on year, down the centuries from the first pre-human ape bashing a rock to make a sharp edge. The unsung army of semi-literate chroniclers preserving Pythagoras and Aristotle from bookworm and mildew, postgraduate students uncredited by the papers their grunt work makes possible, drug trial volunteers paid a few £100s to run the biochemical gauntlet. Or me, giving myself nosebleeds and headaches and vomiting in a bucket, and still getting nowhere. We didn't have years, Maisie didn't have years. She had a few months. Again, I croaked. Evelyn reached for the television's on button, but Rain stopped her with a gesture. I said, again. Heather. Rain leaned down and around in an effort to catch my gaze, one hand on my shoulder. I refused to look. If I met her eyes I'd lose my nerve. Heather, you've done enough for one day, you're shaking. Come on, time for a break. Again, switch it back on. Evie, switch it back on. Evelyn hesitated, looked to Rain instead of me. I'm fine, I hissed. I'm in control. I haven't been sick in over a week. I gestured with irritation at the empty sick bucket next to my chair, the one Rain still insisted on for every session. I can do this, I'm doing fine, I want to do another shape. I can do it. I can. And I believe you, Rain said. But you're also 30 minutes past the time you promised to stop, and when you stand up you're gonna fall over, vomit or no vomit. You're spent, Heather. Time to stop. I grit my teeth, gripped the pencil so tight it creaked in my hand, arm shaking with effort. Rain was right. I wasn't angry with her, I was frustrated by my own weakness, my inability to go faster, to make greater sense of any of this. Progress, every day, yes, but toward what end? What use was any of this? I had to trust gut instinct and hope, and that was thin gruel. Another line, another few dash, I jabbed at the notebook on the table in front of me. Just let me dash. You're also about to bleed on your notes, Rain said. What? I scrubbed at my nose, toothed as my hand came away bloody and glanced down. A mistake. The notebook page I'd been working on for the last 2 hours was 3/4 full of tiny numbers and letters, one long equation that slid in behind my optic nerve and jabbed spears of pain right through to the back of my skull. Had to squeeze my eyes shut, head spinning, stomach threatening rebellion. Hissed through my teeth. Rain knew the drill. She rubbed the back of my neck and head, raked her fingers through my hair, kept me here in the physical, grounded me. I pictured her boobs, because boobs beats hyperdimensional mathematics. Another thing I'd learnt, more useful than anything in the notes. Boobs are invincible. Slow, deep breaths. Don't vomit. Think about boobs. Not sitting here in this chair, not in Evelyn's workshop, not pulling the secrets of creation from a monster in a plastic washing up tub. Not here. Not here. Boobs. Boobs. All right, I'm with Rain, Evelyn grumbled, sliding her chair back. That's the second time this session, we're done for the day. I can do more, I mumbled. You're literally dripping with sweat, Rain said, not unkindly. Fine. I snapped, pulled myself out of her hands, and grabbed the exercise bottle on the table. I yanked up the no-spill tab with my teeth and sucked down a mouthful of lukewarm cherry-flavored energy drink. Keep my electrolytes up. Rain's idea. I thumped the bottle back down. Is that enough? Not even close, boss, no can do. Negotiations start from a bath and a meal first. Mr. Squiddy will be in further residence tomorrow. Another voice added itself to the chorus of sensible suggestions, Preem chiming in from the back of the workshop. Yeah, Rain said. Not like he's going anywhere. Mr. Squiddy, as Preem had taken to calling our uninvited guest, much to Evelyn's silent disapproval, was indeed not about to run off anywhere, not with the level of luxury he now enjoyed. As soon as my little project had blossomed, we'd relocated him from the floor into an extra-large plastic bowl Rain had picked up from home base. I believe it was intended for mixing paint. That operation had taken hours, a masterclass in avoiding supernatural contamination or exposure, and had necessitated the drawing of several different magic circles to safely move the crumbling clay squid thing. He and I did think of it as a he, because Preem kept calling it Mr. Now wallowed in a half-inch of water and a slippery mess of brown smeared up the sides of the tub. Occasionally a tentacle would slop over to the bucket of fresh wet clay next to it, dipping in and scooping more matter to smear over his lashing, writhing form. The amount of clay was carefully measured. We didn't want him actually growing any larger. Mr. Squiddy still looked like a rotting sheet draped over a bunch of squid, but no longer crumbling and dying. Our attentions had ensured it would live, for whatever definition of life that thing possessed, and also ensured that the workshop was filled with the faint sounds of slippery wet clay in constant motion. That's not the point, I mumbled to myself. I know, Rain leaned in and whispered. But you're spent for now. You gotta rest, Heather. I sniffed hard, kept the tears of frustration inside. I hate that we're keeping this thing alive, Evelyn said with a huff, staring at the rotting squid mass. Have I mentioned that? I believe I've mentioned that. I have right of revenge on this thing, surely. Have I mentioned that? Once or twice, Rain said with a smirk, straightening up, hands on my shoulders. Can't rightly recall. I didn't see the humor, not right now. I was disgusted at myself, at my weakness. Every minute I sat here in a comfortable room with my lover and my friends safe at my side was another minute Maisie faded away to nothing in Wonderland. Even if I couldn't see the bigger picture, couldn't see how to apply anything I was learning, I had to keep going. Surely I'd find some application. If it shaved years off my life, so be it. A stubborn, silly, sly part of me uncoiled an appendage that didn't really exist, not yet, not as flesh or pneumosomatic matter, only illusion and mental reinforcement and a trick of the senses. One single tentacle selected from my phantom limbs, the highest on the left side of my hips. I ran through the mental exercises quickly, used to them now, pictured the pale smooth white flesh, the rainbow bioluminescence strobing beneath the surface. I imagined the veins and capillaries and nerve endings, the fat and the delicate tissues, built the limb up from first principles. Real muscles bunched and contracted inside my torso, tendons prepared to take illusory weight. My bruises were a faint discoloration now, but an echo of the pain remained. My tentacle reached for the television's on button. Hey, Heather, not now, Rain said. I flinched and looked up at her, blinking in confusion, my mental construct falling apart and back into mere phantom limb sensation. How did you, Rain, what, how could you tell? I wasn't, I dash. Skewt when you concentrate so hard. I blushed terribly, embarrassed at being caught, mortified at the absurdity, the imaginary tentacle couldn't even touch anything. What? Evelyn frowned. She was doing the visualization thing again. Heather. You can't even touch anything with that, you dash. I know. I blurted out, hiding behind my own hand, face burning. My forehead was sticky with sweat. I know, it just came naturally. Evelyn and Rain looked at each other. I put my face on the table and covered my head with my arms. Hey, Heather, Rain said with a laugh in her voice. She took me by the shoulders, rubbing hard. That's great, that's a good sign. Means you're getting used to it. Isn't that the whole point? Your self-suggestion jazz is working. Doesn't make it any less embarrassing, I muttered into the table. It's not embarrassing. It's cool. You're cool. I struggled up off the table and stared at the dead, blank television screen again. I sighed and cast a final shot. 5 more minutes. Then I'll stop. Lozzie needs her dose of medicinal weirdness tonight, if we're gonna pull the big day off tomorrow, doesn't she? Rain asked. You keep this up, you're gonna be too tired to go with her. Don't want her to go through without you, right? It's not a big day, Evelyn huffed. Stop calling it that. It's an experiment, that's all. Rain raised her fingers from my shoulders in a gesture of easy surrender. Lozzie's still gotta go for some castle time though. She wants to take Tenny along this time, too. She what? I tried to turn in the chair. Oh no. No. I'm vetoing that. Where is she? I need to talk to her. I thought you wanted 5 more minutes. Evelyn asked. I don't, Well, you're not getting it. You've had too much. Evelyn stood up, massaging her hip, wincing softly as her walking stick took her weight. I'm cutting you off. Last call, chucking out time, Rain announced. Evelyn did not laugh. She fixed me with a stare that I couldn't ignore. Don't let this become an addiction. It's not. It's not as if I'll keep doing this once these are complete. I picked up the pad of hyperdimensional mathematics and waved it vaguely in the air. I don't enjoy this, Evie. Can they ever be complete? At what point will you have enough? When I can outthink the eye. She didn't have anything to say to that. Neither did Rain, focused on rubbing my shoulders and smoothing my sweat-soaked hair out of my face. Evelyn held my gaze for a few moments, then sighed and looked away. Either I warn you off because I'm your friend, or I egg you on because this presents an unmatched opportunity. She tapped the head of her walking stick with her fingernails, then shrugged. You still need to rest, regardless of what motivation you want me to apply to you. She held out a hand for the notes. Let me look through those again, see how much I need to transcribe. Good luck. I passed her the notes, but when she took the heavy black notebook I held on a moment too long. Evelyn raised an eyebrow at me before I finally let go, surprised at myself, drawing my hand back and rubbing at my wrist. Sorry, I muttered. It's silly, you and your family have looked after much older books, for much longer. Of course it's safe with you. Evelyn stared at me with a curious frown, then flipped the notebook open and leafed through. I was almost jealous of the way she could so easily look over those figures, my looping scrawl, often degenerating into chicken scratch and spiderweb in the most difficult moments, page after page after page of it. We had 2 more notebooks upstairs, filled from cover to cover, tucked away in a safe in the study, plus Evelyn's carefully transcribed versions of my more illegible parts. I'd filled half of this most recent notebook in only the last 4 days. Evelyn scanned my work unassaulted by icepick headaches or the creeping clutch of nausea. In the wrong hands, this would be just as dangerous as Imprensabilis vermis, she said. As anything in my collection. You mean you're starting to understand it? Evelyn glanced up at me and laughed once, a harsh bark. Not head nor tail, but that doesn't mean others wouldn't. We already know you're not the only person in the world who understands hyperdimensional mathematics. Lozzie's not quite the same though. She's just bad at maths, Evelyn said, snapping the book shut with one hand. This goes in the box until next time. I nodded, sagging inside. This was all so slow, and I had no guarantee that any of it would work. Not for the first time, I asked myself why I was doing this. Because I had no other leads. I'd followed Maisie's advice and gathered my friends, but now what? Even with this breakthrough, with all this technique I was gathering, how could I possibly fight the eye? I could barely even think about what I was putting down on paper without being sick. It didn't matter how much of it I could learn unless I could forge it into something useful, something greater, something less fragile than little old me, physical or abyssal. No idea where to start. Just had to have faith. Rain must have felt the lurking despair running beneath my skin, because suddenly she squeezed a little too hard, enough to draw an unexpected grunt from me. Ah, Rain. Too hard. No, do that again. Left shoulder, please. You're pushing yourself too hard, she murmured. What would Zheng say? She'd probably tell me to keep going, then carry me to bed when I pass out. You want me to carry you to bed? Rain asked. Evelyn sighed and rolled her eyes and stepped out with the notebook tucked under one arm. She clacked through the kitchen, out into the front room, and creaked up the stairs. I didn't answer, too focused on the mental exercise of rebuilding my tentacle. These weeks of practice had made it habit now, the slow process of picturing muscle and tendon, skin and fat, mentally counting the imaginary anchors inside my own body, preparing their creation in hyperdimensional mathematics but not executing, not yet, by pain of most dread promises to my friends. I saw it in my mind's eye by force of self-suggestion, a solid pale white appendage that uncoiled from my flank and stretched out into the air. Doing it again, huh? Rain asked softly. It's getting easier every time. Wanna slap me in the face with it? What? She asked, grinning like a loon. Thought I'd developed a fascinating and dangerous new fetish? I hope not. Come on, practice. It's not like you can actually hit me with it. Just try it out. I don't know, not right now. I looked down and let my concentration wander, forgot the tentacle again. But thank you. Hey, you can try out your tentacles on me any which way. This time she didn't even bother to hide the joke. I rolled my eyes as Rain laughed, but inside I flushed with slow-burning relief, the kind she'd been pampering me with. The dirty jokes that lifted my defeatism, the pats on the bottom and the sudden unexpected hands up my t-shirt that dragged me back into my body, the kisses that reminded me what mattered, they all helped more than I could express, and Rain had been very liberal with her attention these last 3 weeks. Between hyperdimensional mathematics and building myself an extra limb via self-hypnosis, it was a minor miracle I wasn't losing my mind yet. Rain kept me sane. Let's get you in the shower, yeah, she said, helping me out of the chair. My legs wobbled and I held her hand for support. She slipped her other arm around my waist and held on tight as I leaned into her. I think you've earned some special attention. Special attention, Preem echoed. Rain laughed. You keep your ears to yourself. My mind made several leaps of free association. Perhaps it was the mental exhaustion, or perhaps I was just getting bold or lazy. Where is Zheng, anyway? I asked. Wasn't she here this morning? I thought she was watching. Went hunting, Rain answered. Said she'd be back this evening, in time for Lozzie's little outing. Wanna cook or catch again? I wrinkled my nose. Only if it's pheasant or rabbit. No squirrels. And absolutely no badger. In fact, I need to tell her to stop killing badger at all, it's upsetting. Hey, squirrels cooked properly are perfectly safe. They're also disgusting. At least she's helping with the food budget. Zheng had spent the last 3 weeks living like a huge semi-domesticated cat, sleeping all over the house in different spots every night, spending every second day out in the woods, hunting game or eating wildlife. I never knew if she was going to be around, but Rain seemed to. Either they were coordinating behind my back, or Rain was watching her every move like a hawk. I didn't know which possibility was worse. Rain walked me out of the workshop and into the kitchen. My eyes settled on the chessboard on the kitchen table, the pieces frozen mid-game. Gonna make a move? Rain asked. Maybe later. She's close to figuring this one out, you know. She might beat you this time. Perhaps I should let her. I sighed. No, she'd know that right away, wouldn't she? Zheng had yet to take a single game off me, and I wasn't exactly a very good chess player. Strategy was not her strong point, though she occasionally made bold plays that required serious thought. The game had been Evelyn's idea, to everyone's surprise. I suspected she was trying to domesticate the giant zombie. Zheng either didn't care or hadn't caught on, and took me up on the challenge. She was a good loser, sporting, amused against me, at least. Preem moved to follow us out of the workshop. At the threshold she turned on her heel with a little click and performed what was becoming her usual routine, one that Evelyn had told her to stop doing. "Stay," she said out loud, to the blob of clay rolling and slurping in a plastic tub. I glanced back, over the shoulder of Preem's maid uniform, past the hateful squirming mass of imitation squid, beyond the table with the old CRT television. Past all of it, on the back wall, the gateway mandala waited for Evelyn's final touches. The massive fan-shaped design surrounded the blank doorway shape in the middle. For a moment it seemed to stare back at me like an empty eyeball. It was almost ready, all the other additions laid out on temporary paper, held in place with masking tape so we could switch them back and forth. In a few hours we'd strip them off and replace them with the necessary marks to take us back to the cult's castle again, but then tomorrow loomed. Tomorrow, we were going to perform an experiment. And for that, we were going back to the library of Carcosa. 3 weeks had passed since our woodland outing in Tenny's messy, physical rebirth. 3 weeks since my midnight notion had borne fruit. The thing from the Sherriford cult's trap in Glasswick Tower, the shard of outsider thought which had been lodged in Alexander's corpse like a jungle booby trap, the Eye's minion sent to cripple us, whatever it really was, it contained a treasure trove of secrets. As long as it's not Pandora's box, Evelyn had said, that night. The shapes it was displaying on the television screen were a form of mathematical notation, principles crystallized in the relations between 1,000 surfaces and angles. A language of maths dreamed up by an alien with 100 eyes and 1,000 fists. Nobody but I could see that, of course, because nobody had the actual math with which to read them. It hurt, of course. I figured it out, ripped a principle from one of the abstract shapes, transcribed it onto a sheet of paper with shaking hands as my eyes burned and my nose leaked blood. 1/8 of a single puzzle piece in a billion-piece pattern. But I recognized it. Hyperdimensional mathematics. You understand what this means? I brandished the piece of paper at Evelyn, shaking with cold sweat. In retrospect I must have looked like I'd lost my mind. Evie, it thinks in hyperdimensional math, that's what it's showing us. I know this stuff, I look at it and I know it already. Heather, I understand your interest, I really do, Evelyn told me. But stop. Think. It's an obvious trap. Think. Put that pencil down, you're going to put your own eye out. Look, it can't escape that body, can't cross the air gap, can't use the television to do anything except communicate, and it's chosen to communicate hyperdimensional math right into your brain, you dash. It isn't, GUH. I choked a little, had to swallow and wet my lips. Preem brought me a glass of water, and Zheng had opened her eyes again, watching us from the kitchen with the interested silence of a big cat observing curious prey. Evelyn waited for me to recover. I wiped my mouth on the back of my hand, scrubbed at my nosebleed, and gestured at the piece of paper again, at the mass of figures I'd scrawled. It isn't anything new, I explained, but had to avert my eyes before the thoughts made me nauseous again. These are principles and equations I already know, I think. Things I've already been taught. But it's easier this way. Like when you already know something but somebody else explains it better than you can. It's so much clearer. Evie, it makes sense to me already, but it's easier. I stared at the television screen again, at the multicolored abstract shapes moving within, and it seemed as if I gazed not upon a curved surface of glass or a three-dimensional representation within, but into an actual space that existed inside the television, a window into some other universe in which all our physical laws were represented in some alien language of space and angle and color. The shifting shapes looked like something a computer might generate, part of a model of a hurricane or a tidal wave or an explosion, but moving at 1/100th of the speed, each piece rotating with aching slowness. Each separate shape had dozens upon dozens of sides and angles, and each angle and side corresponded to every other side and angle to reveal a molten-hot piece of hyperdimensional mathematics. If I concentrated and held on to the contents of my stomach, I could write it down. Much easier than dredging my soul directly for the same information. Examining my own mind was a nightmare. The things that lurked at the bottom of my subconscious always caught me with barbed hooks of pain, the lessons from the eye like boiling tar in my brain. But this I could drag from another's thoughts, and render down on paper. Heather. Heather. Shaman. Heather. It took all three voices, Evelyn, Zheng, and Preem, to snap me back to myself. I scrubbed at my face, realized my nosebleed had restarted, my head pounding, my limbs shaking, a sickness growing in my belly. That doesn't mean it couldn't still be a trap, Evelyn said. A crude one, improvised, yes, but a trap all the same, Heather. Are you all right? No. I almost fell out of the chair that first time. Zheng was fastest on her feet, into the workshop and catching me before my head hit the ground, strong arms around my back and belly as she hoisted me back into the chair. Just exhaustion, excitement, and the natural drain of hyperdimensional mathematics, even if I was only interpreting rather than executing. A glass of water and a good sit, and 5 minutes later I felt ready to try again. I've been racking my brain for months about how to do this, I said, looking between a frowning Evelyn and a towering Zheng. How on earth I'm supposed to fight the eye, wrestle Maisie from it when even the simplest thing makes me bleed and pass out? This is the first lead I've had, the first source. I have to try, I have to know what's in there. The wizard may be right, shaman, Zheng had rumbled, one surprisingly gentle hand resting atop my head like I was a small child. It may be a trap. Do not ignore uncomfortable potentials. I don't care if it's a trap. I snapped at her. If it is, that only means I have to beat it. There's no other choice. Zheng stared, then broke into a dark smile. Shaman. And I swallowed, couldn't say why yet, a mad notion surfacing in my mind. I don't think it's a trap. Evelyn slid an old notebook across the table, toward me. Her hand lingered on it, and a strange look lingered in her eyes as she watched me. I recognized it instantly, but this time I welcomed it, because it meant she was going to back me up. She looked at me with hunger. Try again then, she said. Let's verify this works. Then bed, Preem had intoned. Yes, I sighed, not quite insane with hope just yet. Once more, then I promise I'll go to bed. I promise. Once more had turned into a marathon session the following day, the first of many, during which I'd sat at the table and pulled secrets from the mind of a thing that very may well have been trying to corrupt me. But it didn't, and my suspicions grew. Rain insisted I never do this alone. We almost had an argument and I blamed myself for that, my hatred of my own weakness turning barbs outward on her. She settled it in the end. Who's going to save your sister if this thing cooks your brain? Rain, that's not, I dash. No. I want to be there every time you dive into what it's showing you, so I can pull you out by the scruff of your neck if I have to. And if you don't like that, I can talk to Zheng and get her to enforce the rule instead. She encouraged me, she dash. We're both supposed to be looking after you. And hey, apparently she's bigger and scarier than me. Either I watch, or Zheng pulls you out of the chair. My acquiescence was more for the sake of keeping that conflict frozen, not any acknowledgement that what I was doing might be dangerous. We still couldn't figure out what the other part of Mr. Squiddy's show meant, the writing on the wall of black bricks. It wasn't any human language, at least not one that had survived the sands of time. But as 3 weeks passed, he showed it less and less, and focused more on the hyper-complex shapes. As if responding to me. The more of the shapes I interpreted, the more pages I filled with obscure notation, the more I began to realize that I didn't know all of this. At first each fragment of equation had seemed familiar, in the manner a scent might tease out a half-forgotten memory. But as I dug deeper I found these equations were not only filling in gaps, drawing connections I was unaware of, but were exercising the parts of my mind left bruised and bloody by the trip to the abyss. Hyperdimensional mathematics became less like tonguing the socket of a shattered tooth. Perhaps it was sent for me, not Evie. The I gave you homework? Rain laughed. Don't joke about that, Evelyn had grumbled. Something this size could never contain the totality of the I's thoughts. It's a carrier with leftover instructions. Heather, that's what you're repurposing. That's all. Yes, right, of course. I'd swallowed, nodded, tried to believe. The I had made a second mistake, that was all. This wasn't a miracle. It wasn't intentional. At least, I never let the opposite thought reach my lips. This creature had been deployed against us as a weapon, lodged inside Alexander's corpse, summoned by the Sherrowford cult in their worship of the I. It had almost killed Evelyn. But a little voice whispered to me. This wouldn't be the first time my twin sister had co-opted one of the I's vectors, would it? Her first message had been just as inscrutable, just as terrifying. The messenger had been an alien thing. And this one hadn't been noticed by anybody except us. But this trap had sprung before I'd dived into the abyss. Surely Maisie would have told me if this was her doing, wouldn't she? Then again, she'd had so little energy left to communicate, she may not have been able to. She'd expended everything she had to convince me to return to my body. Maybe she'd slipped this in, piggybacking information via the I's minion. The possibility ate me up inside. Deny as I might, in my secret heart I treated it as a gift, from Maisie. With the kind of clarity that comes from deep and careful consideration of an astoundingly stupid plan, we decided not to commit terrorism for the purpose of demolishing Glasswick Tower. We'd spent an awkward evening trying to come up with a safe way to confirm what Amy Stack had claimed, that Alexander's corpse had been removed, but we kept running into the issue of more traps, or the building waking up and eating one of us as it had swallowed Jing during our escape. None of us wanted to set foot inside, despite Rain's laughing bravado. Preem is not going again, I won't send her. Under no conditions, Evelyn had said. I won't have her risked. You're going soft on her, Evie, Rain teased. Yes, I am, Evelyn deadpanned back. Preem had said nothing to that. Jing solved the problem for us, overnight, on her own, without telling anybody first. I'd spent a very confused hour before bed wondering where my mobile phone had gone. She'd returned in the small hours of the morning, waiting triumphantly in the kitchen in her new trench coat and boots, baggy ribbed sweater and long jeans. We'd bought her 2 changes of new clothes, and she insisted on this shapeless, baggy outfit as much as possible. I didn't blame her. It made for a comfortable hug. Jing. I'd caught the smug look on her face, even through the groggy layers of sleep packed in my head like cotton wool. She stood there almost steaming from the cold outdoors. Shaman, she bellowed a laugh and tossed me my phone. Of course I fumbled the catch, dropped it on the kitchen floor where it slid into the wall. Thank heaven for phone cases and screen protectors. I sighed and trudged over and picked it up, then turned a confused look on Zheng. What were you doing with my phone? I was looking for it all last night. Taking pictures. I boggled at her and opened the phone's photo album. Why didn't you ask? I thumbed through picture after picture, trailing off. She'd taken hundreds. She shrugged. Forgiveness is easier than permission. What is all this? Crumbled pieces of wall, masses of shredded concrete, broken spars of rebar, all of it caught in camera flash that revealed true darkness in the background like the depths of a cave. A half-demolished interior, fallen to ruin and rubble. The tower, shaman, she purred. It's a shell. The wizard's corpse is gone. I stared again at the pictures scrolling past on the phone's tiny backlit screen, quite unreal in the morning spring chill with the comfortable, familiar kitchen all around. Rain shuffled in behind me and peered over my shoulder. This is where Alexander was? The hollowed-out floors? I asked. Zheng grunted an affirmative. But this was all twisted. Biological. And now it's dead. They removed the heart. He's gone. I nodded, still numb. You sound disappointed, Rain said. Good news though. What are you sore about? Zheng grunted. No fight in it. No fight in it. I gaped at her, then tooted and rolled my eyes. You wanted to fight a building again, of course. This time I would win, shaman. We spent breakfast looking over those pictures, even called Twill round so she could tell her family the news, but there really was nothing to see. If a surveyor or homeless person or urban explorer climbed Glasswick Tower, they'd come away with an unsolvable mystery of internal vandalism. Evelyn peppered Zheng with questions. Was there any sign of magical workings left? Any bodies? Could she tell how recently anyone else had been there? Was she seen on the way, or back here? What was she thinking, stalking around Sherrowford, even with her change of new clothes and clean hair? Zheng got bored, answered in monosyllabic grunts. In the end we settled on a plan to upload some of the pictures to a major urban explorer website. Rain carefully scrubbed them of traceable information, a process that was utterly beyond me, and then posed as an anonymous concerned citizen. She worried about load-bearing walls and building collapses, asked how this could have gotten so bad, and what was the city going to do about it. The aftermath of that made the local news. One of the photos even cropped up in a Sherrowford newspaper, put through a grainy filter for some unfathomable reason. They tried to blame homeless squatters, but cooler heads pointed out that level of demolition would require weeks of sledgehammering and powered cutting tools, and no nearby residents had reported any noise. The level of decay and crumbled concrete looked months old. Had the construction been botched, had water got in, was the concrete bad when it was laid? Glasswick Tower came down 6 months later, properly demolished, no need for illegal explosives or shady calls to the police. Gleaston Tower got a once-over by building inspectors, and was pronounced healthy with little fanfare. The mundane world moved on. But I didn't, not quite, always half expecting the rotten, headless corpse of Alexander Lilburn to show up at the window in the dead of night. At least Lozzie didn't seem bothered, and her continued good cheer helped us all, I suspect. She never mentioned her brother, wasn't interested in the fate of Glasswick Tower, spent most of her time doting on Tenny, teaching her to speak, playing with her in the old disused sitting room, reading books to her. My time split 3 ways, across those 3 weeks. 1/3 went toward university. Amid all of this I still had classes and essays, had to pull my finger out, as Rain so delicately put it, and scrounge up a few thousand words on Kafka. I played the good student during the day, attended lectures, tried to take notes. I'd never clung to the hope of a normal future before, so pretending now was not easy. Only a love of books kept me going. The second third went to Maisie, to dragging the secrets of hyperdimensional mathematics from the squid thing in the workshop, trying to build some kind of blueprint to combat the eye, with no notion of how to start. The final third went into my tentacle. Tentacle, singular, for now. Once I had one down, the others would be easier, or at least that's how the theory went. In my free time I devoured biology textbooks, pinned human anatomy diagrams to the wall behind my laptop, read about the basics of biochemistry and what muscles were made of. I watched videos of squid and octopus on the ocean floor, pined for the abyss, tried to recall the feeling of a mutable, changeable body. I understood almost none of it, science was not my favorite subject. My best hope was that my subconscious would retain the details, use it as fodder, fill the gaps in my creative work. My sketches and diagrams were of equally poor quality. I'll never be an illustrator, but the point was to give my imagination concrete images to work with. I drew the muscles inside my torso, an approximation of my own ribcage, sketched out where the tentacle should attach inside, the ligaments holding it in place, the cartilage anchoring it safely to a dozen internal points of flesh and bone. One night, Rain even suggested we draw on my body itself, and I was going to take her up on that soon. Kimberly, of all people, surprised me. She taught me how to visualize. Most people use it for spells, she'd said, alone in the little room she'd made her own, sat cross-legged on lilac bed covers taken from her flat in Gleaston Tower. She hadn't moved back out yet, and Evelyn hadn't asked her to. Wiccan spells, I mean. I know you don't believe that stuff, but you don't have to. I am not going to ask you to. Anything that might help is welcome. I mean it, Kim. Please, go on. Kimberly had glanced over at the open door, uncomfortable at the idea others might be listening in. She'd found a new job at last, and spent as much time out of the house as possible, away from Zheng. If anybody bothers you, I told her. You can come to me. Zheng intimidates you, I'll slap her. And she has to stand there and take it. She glanced up at me and twitched this nervous little smile, tucked a lock of stay auburn hair behind one ear. Okay. Okay. Please don't slap her though. I won't, that was exaggeration. Well, okay, there's this other way of using visualization too. Do you know what a tulpa is? I shook my head. It's a Buddhist thing, she said. But I've seen people on the internet use it to make, she swallowed, blushed a little. Imaginary friends. Imaginary friends? Don't laugh, please, it really does work. And it's not a magical thing, just a mind trick thing. You do visualization over and over again, talk to a person who isn't really there, and if you do it right and reinforce it again and again you sort of convince your brain it's real. I thought maybe it would work in a similar way for your problem. Yes, I can see how that might be useful. I gestured without thinking, at the phantom limbs that lurked on the edge of my mind. You don't see them already, do you? I shook my head. They're exactly like mundane phantom limbs. I can feel where they should be, not see them. That's all. Kimberly nodded. Then, close your eyes. Sit down first, I mean. Sit down and close your eyes, and we'll talk through, what they look like. What you want them to look like. I think. I've done this before with girls from the coven, for spells. Apparently I'm not bad at leading this sort of thing, so, I hope I'm good enough. You are, Kim. You are. It's okay, show me how it's done. No flying, no flappy, no floop. Lozzie said, bobbing her head from side to side with each word. Repeat after me, no flying. No flying, Tenny repeated. She blinked huge black eyes at Lozzie, then looked up and away, out one of the empty castle windows, into the sunless sky and the thick fog beyond. Her flesh cloak twitched and rippled, threatening to unfold into wings. No. Lozzie put her hands on Tenny's shoulders, tamping down the cloak flutter. No flying. No going through the sky, not here, no. Tenny looked at her again. Her antennae twitched back and forth, and touched each other. We'd learned that meant she was thinking very hard indeed. No, she echoed. No. Is that a refusal? I spoke up. Or an echo? Tenny. She looked at me instead, and Tenny wiggling. No, she fluttered. You have to stay on the ground, Lozzie said. It's dangerous out there, okay? The big ones are friends. Lozzie pointed at the Squid-Moons, two of them visible, sitting on the ground out in the copied mile of Sherrowford, like mountains blotting out the horizon. But all the small stuff, maybe might not know you. So you have to stay here, stay by me and Auntie Heather and Auntie Rain, okay? Heather. Tenny repeated. My name had rapidly become Tenny's favorite word. We'd figured out she wasn't capable of the full range of human facial expressions, but when she looked over at me again I could see the happiness in her eyes all the same, shining through that slick wet darkness. Yes, Tenny, I managed through the tiredness hanging heavy on my bones. Lozzie's right. No flying. Stay here, okay? Tenny turned her head and gazed out of the window once more, almost wistfully. You know, it wouldn't be a bad place to experiment, Rain said. At least here nobody's gonna spot her. Don't, Evelyn hissed from another dimension, back in Sherrowford, standing about 3 feet back on the far side of the gateway. Don't tempt her and don't tempt fate. That's the least you can do. Let's get this outing over with. Tenny rustled her wings one more time, then turned away and puffed up her cheeks. No flying, she fluttered. Her voice had matured over the last 3 weeks. Perhaps she'd cleared the remnants of amniotic fluid from whatever she used in place of vocal cords, perhaps her lungs had grown stronger, or perhaps it was merely confidence, but the fluttery paper sound of her voice had mellowed into a soft dry buzz not unlike a cicada with the volume turned down. She looked at me, looked at Rain standing outside the circle, then left Lozzie and paced around the perimeter of our little safe zone. Her tentacles extended from beneath her wings as she paced, reaching out to probe the osseous bone-like walls of the cult's castle, but even Tenny disliked the touch of this dead husk place. Her tentacles touched, recoiled, hovered, and went in search of more interesting objects: the hem of Preem's skirt, the second unoccupied camp chair next to the one I was sitting in, and my hand. She slipped her tentacle into my hand. I gave it a squeeze. No flying, she repeated, then made this little huffing breathy noise. Frustration. No flying, no flying. We all shared a glance. Rain was ready to tackle her at the first sign she was going to launch herself at a window. She's not going to, I said softly, and indicated the hand holding. See? We were gathered in the lofty upper reaches of what had once been the Sherrowford cult's castle, but was rapidly becoming our patio in another dimension, overlooking a verdant jungle of unceasing alien life. Surrounded by the stomach-turning bone-like surfaces of the walls and floor, tendrils of fog creeping in through the bank of windows, with the gateway back to Sherrowford open behind us, we made the best of it. Rain and I, Lozzie with Tenny, Preem standing on silent watch, Evelyn on the far side of the gateway just in case something went wrong. The purpose of this outing, like the two before it, was to stave off Lozzie's supernatural narcolepsy. She still couldn't go outside. She and I were still cut off. Her limit was about a week, before she started nodding and drowsing, falling asleep standing up, blinking bleary eyes at all hours of the day and night alike. This was our plan for regular treatment. Every 5 or 6 days Evelyn replaced the necessary parts of the gateway mandala and reopened the door into the castle. The first time we did this we'd all stood around looking tense. I'd struggled to keep a lid on my own sense of the absurd. Rain had openly carried her gun. Evelyn had directed Preem in painting a huge magic circle which encompassed the gateway itself, the wall it emerged from, and a massive section of the hallway. Protection against the unknown. Technically it shouldn't be scary anymore. We knew the moon-sized monsters beyond were on Lozzie's side, or at least not hostile, but we had no idea if any of the life in the copied streets had made its way inside the castle, or what leftovers lurked in the deeper hallways. The second time we brought folding chairs, a stool, binoculars for looking out of the window and down at the chaotic churn of bizarre life below. We made it into a whole activity, not something to be feared, despite, well, the fog and the cold and the alien cacophony. The third time, we brought snacks. This time we were ahead of schedule. Lozzie was still going strong, but we wanted to eliminate all wild card variables for tomorrow. Lozzie was a crucial part of tomorrow's experiment in Carcosa, if only because she could perform it with a flick of her wrist rather than my minutes of agony of blood and vomit. All would go so much quicker if she could simply confirm our hypothesis with a thought. Tenny padded around the edges of the magic circle, stopped before Preem, and made little buzzing sounds at her. Lozzie caught up and hugged her from behind, around the middle, giggling, her pastel poncho twirling as she skipped along. Poor Tenny had been cooped up for weeks. She hadn't seemed bored, exactly, listening to Lozzie reading books out loud, following me around and watching all the things I did, stalking Jing through the house like a territorial puppy. Despite her blunt expressions and basic curiosity, she'd taken a great interest in the chess game, almost eaten several of the pieces, seemed not to be listening as I explained the rules and then beaten me a dozen times without even looking at the board. Then beaten Evelyn. Then Preem, who nobody else had bested yet. Her tentacles had played all the moves. My little savant. Rain was right, Tenny did need to stretch her wings, eventually. We hadn't let her fly yet, we had no idea how to make it safe for her. Perhaps this place really would be a better option than letting her into the skies over Sherrowford. I glanced out of the windows as well, huge and empty, at the giant Squid-Moons and the hint of life churning away in the fog below. Tenny was shivering slightly in the cold fog. Her flesh cloak pressed tighter, wrapping her deeper in the interior fur. I hugged myself too. Maybe it was warmer down in the streets. Heather. Rain called my name softly. I'm fine, just thinking. You sure? Wanna go back and warm up? Not getting cold down there? A little, but I'm fine. Thank you. By down there, Rain meant the canvas camping chair. I was wrapped up in my hoodie and coat. The fog trailed tendrils of pale mist up my trouser cuffs and down my collar, but the thought of those bodies further out there in the rest of the castle made me shudder inside no matter how well I warmed up. I felt like we were playing at normality here, in our little semicircle of peace and light. Clearing the castle out, getting downstairs and shutting the front door, may well have been completely beyond our resources. I was still worn out from this morning, from dredging for hyperdimensional mathematics, and I wasn't looking forward to tomorrow, a churning nervousness in my guts at the idea of voluntarily stepping outside again after so many weeks. But at least we'd have an answer. At least we'd know. Preem and Tenny were speaking with their eyes, a silent conversation of taciturn creatures. Rain and I shared a glance over that, then she shrugged for me and looked out of the glassless window, down into the copied streets of the false mile of Sherrowford far below. I saw the stiffness in her shoulders in the moment before she spoke. Lozzie, Rain said softly. Would you please take Tenny back into the workshop? Ah. Lozzie looked up. Preem did the same. Back. Back inside, Tenny fluttered and frilled, tilting her head one way then the other. She felt the tension as clear as I did. Are we going? Going. Going. I got out of the chair, arms crossed against the cold. Rain, what is it? Lozzie. Rain turned, grabbing the binoculars off the other chair. Now, please, back inside. Lozzie tugged on Tenny's arm, guided her back through to our reality. They peered at us from the workshop, and Evelyn frowned, looking like she was going to shoo them away, then sighed and stepped through to the castle. What is it now? She snapped. We can't afford distractions tonight, Rain, not Dash. Looks like somebody's been here besides us, Rain said. Preem stepped up next to her, peering out of the window too. You watch the edge of the circle. Evelyn hissed at her, walking stick clicking across the desiccated bone floor. What do you mean? I asked, heart in my throat. Rain, is somebody out there? Rain put the binoculars to her eyes, stared for a moment. She offered them to me and Evelyn, then hesitated and grimaced. Actually, maybe best not look. Give me those, Evelyn hissed, and pulled the binoculars from Rain's grip. She huffed and bustled up to the lip of the window, jamming the binoculars against her face. Corpse, Preem intoned, voice carrying like a cracked bell in the fog. Evelyn turned slightly green, lowered the binoculars with a shaking hand, and couldn't breathe for a second or two. Corpse. I echoed in a whisper. Two corpses, actually, Rain said with a grim sort of smile. There's a pair of dead bodies down in the street, and they ain't no natives.